the ice and fire demon god of Hogwarts. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 326, My lifelong dance partner. Hearing Lin's words, Irina unconsciously covered her mouth with both hands. Her ice blue eyes were full of surprise and excitement. Dancing partner? Irina pretended to look at him in confusion, but she was so excited that she kept rubbing her hands together, which revealed her joy. Lin smiled and said, "Yes, Irina, will you be my dancing partner? I mean, a dancing partner for life, not just for this Christmas dance. Is this a confession? Exclamation mark. Is this a confession? Exclamation mark. Does it count? Exclamation mark. Does it count? Exclamation mark. Does it count? Exclamation mark." Irina's ice blue eyes were about to be filled with love. She had imagined 10,000 possible scenes of Lin confessing to her, but she didn't expect the surprise to come so suddenly. You know, on the day they went to Madame Puddifoot's tea house in Hogsmeade Village, Lin's stupid behavior had made her no longer hope for Lin's active confession. She was ready to confess her feelings to Lin En after the Christmas party, but the scene that happened in front of her now filled her mind with a sweet emotion. Not far away, Furing's expression dimmed. After seeing this scene, she knew that Lin En had already had someone in her heart. It was just that the fact that Lin En and Irina had not yet confirmed their relationship gave her the illusion that she still had a chance. In fact, Furing's feelings for Lin En were not as deep as she imagined. Most of them were gratitude and joy for being treated equally. "Bless you, Lin En," Furing said in a voice that only she could hear. She raised her hand and wiped the corners of her eyes, which were wet. Obviously, her feelings for Lin En were only gratitude and joy. But why did she feel so bitter? Furing retreated step by step, but the bitterness in her heart became more and more intense. Soon, after completely leaving the other person's sight, Fleur could no longer control herself. She turned around and ran towards the direction of Hogwarts Castle, and 2 lines of wet tears flowed from her blue eyes. When Fleur returned to Hogwarts Castle, she had already restrained her emotions, leaving only those 2 barely perceptible tear marks. However, she, who had just cried, now gave people a feeling of being full of charm. "Miss Delica, please, can you be my dance partner?" At this time, Ron, who happened to be walking down the stairs, saw Fleur's appearance. Perhaps because of the charm magic of the half-blood Veela, Ron was stunned and asked foolishly. Thinking back to the sunny and powerful Lin, and seeing Ron in front of her with a perverted look, Fleur, who was already in a bad mood, suddenly turned cold. Her disgust was beyond words, and she looked at Ron as if she was looking at a piece of trash. Some young wizards who had woken up not far away all cast their eyes over, as if they were watching a good show. Feeling the jealous eyes of the young wizards around him, and the trash-like look of Fleur, Ron finally came to his senses. He ran away with his face covered, wanting to cry but unable to. The shore of the Black Lake. "So, what's your answer?" Lin En looked at the girl in front of him softly, his voice gentle. Irina looked up at the face so close. She was so excited that she was incoherent and choked with excitement. "Well, of course, I do. Woo woo, you know, I can't choose anyone else but you," she whispered, as if she felt that words could no longer explain her feelings. She lowered her head and threw herself into Lin En's arms. Lin En raised his hand and wiped the corners of Irina's eyes. With his other hand, he hugged the girl's slender waist and said with a smile, "Why are you still crying? If others see this, they will think I'm bullying you." Hearing this, Irina burst into laughter. She raised her head, and her big eyelashes brushed across Lin En's face, making Lin En feel itchy. Her ice blue eyes blinked again and again, and her eyes were full of joy. "So, is this a confession? Lin En smiled and rested his forehead against her head. "If you are still not satisfied, after the Christmas ball, I will give you a formal confession. How about it?" Irina hugged Lin En tightly and said in a crisp voice like a child who got her favorite toy, "Okay, but don't regret it." Looking at Irina's pretty face like an apple, Lin En couldn't help but bit her on the face, leaving only a circle of saliva marks. "Oh, The girl screamed, but she did not resist, but her already slightly red face became even redder. Irina stared at Lin En's handsome face, and she took the initiative to put her arms around Lin En's neck. She whispered, "Lin En, I don't want to practice magic now." As she said that, the girl closed her eyes. "Then, practice something else?" Lin En smiled knowingly, and he gently kissed the girl's lips, expressing the love from the bottom of his heart with his actions. The soft and sticky touch made Lin En sink into it. This kiss lasted for half an hour, until the sun rose completely. The noise of the little wizards came from outside the castle, and Lin En and Irina separated reluctantly, with a string of crystal water beads hanging at the corners of their mouths. At this time, Irina also came back to her senses. Thinking back to the crazy behavior just now, she quickly hid her face under the light blue hood and wiped the crystal beads at the corners of her mouth with her hands. She was carrying a small school bag, with her back to the castle, where little wizards kept walking out. Her long snow white hair fell on her shoulders. The rising sun illuminated her hair and profile, but it couldn't hide her slightly red face. She looked at Lin En carefully. "Let's go, my dear girl. I think it's time to enjoy breakfast now." Lin En had a heartfelt smile on his lips. He leaned down slightly and extended his hand to invite Irina. Irina also smiled slightly. She put her little hand on Lin En's hand. Her eyes with lingering affection stayed on Lin En's profile for a long time and couldn't move away. They no longer cared about the eyes of those little wizards, but walked close together towards Hogwarts Castle. This might be the happiest day for him in all these years. Lin En lowered his head and met Irina's ice blue eyes. He felt as if he was wrapped in soft cotton, and his whole body was filled with warmth. The partners who once fought side by side have now become companions sharing the same grave. This change of identity makes them feel as if they are standing on the riverbed of love, pouring out the affection that was originally suppressed in their hearts. Chapter 327 The person who understands you must be your best friend. At the same time that Lin and Irina were walking into Hogwarts Castle in a loving way, in the Gryffindor common room, Ron, who had been rejected by Fleur in the Great Hall, was now sitting on a sofa in the corner with a pale face. His sister Ginny Weasley was sitting next to him, talking to him in a low voice, as if to comfort him. Harry and Hermione were also standing next to him, but they seemed to have just arrived, and it was not clear what had happened to Ron. "What happened, Ron?" Harry and Hermione asked in confusion. Hearing this, Ron looked up at Harry and Hermione, with a look of shock on his face. "Why did I do that?" he said in annoyance. "I don't know how I could have done that." Looking at Harry and Hermione with a confused look on her face, Ginny patted Ron on the shoulder with an expression, as if she was trying to hold back a laugh. She said to them, He just invited Fleur Delacour to go to the ball with him." Harry was stunned, and then asked in disbelief, "What's wrong with you?" In Harry's opinion, Ron didn't seem like the kind of person who would go to Fleur Delacour. Of course, this was not because he thought Fleur was a bad person, but because he thought Ron was self-aware. Ron looked devastated. He gasped and said, "I don't know how I could have done such a thing. Who am I kidding? There were people everywhere, crowded with people. I really lost my head. Everyone was watching. I met her when I walked down the stairs and saw that she seemed to have just come back from outside the castle. Suddenly I couldn't control myself. I went up to her and asked her." Ron covered his face with his hands, wailing and rolling on the sofa like a maggot. He looked like a madman and made unclear mumbling sounds. "She looked at me as if I were a sea cucumber or something and didn't bother to answer, and then, I don't know, I suddenly came to my senses and ran away." Seeing this scene, Harry and Hermione looked at each other. In order to change the subject, Hermione said, "Ron, to be honest, you and Harry should find a dance partner. The Christmas ball is coming soon." Hearing this, Harry said helplessly, "Hermione, you know me. I don't want to dance with girls I don't know. I don't know what Professor McGonagall is thinking. She insisted that I find a dance partner." Hermione rolled her eyes and said, "You are a warrior. If you don't go, who will? Warriors are to set an example. Although this identity is imposed on you, you must also take on this responsibility." Harry lay on another sofa sadly, looking like a salted fish. In the life of Hogwarts Castle in the past few years, the glory that originally belonged to the savior was overshadowed by Lin and Irina too much. Even some things that were originally done by Harry, now he doesn't even have the qualifications to watch. Just like the basilisk incident, when the basilisk was killed by Lin and Irina together, Harry learned from the school's notice that the monster was a basilisk. Because of this, Harry was like an ordinary little wizard, and he was happy and miserable in his study life. Even though he was still the seeker of the Gryffindor Quidditch team as in the original book, just some competitions in the game were not enough to support him to be devoted to Zanqiu, the seeker of the Ravenclaw Quidditch team as in the original book. In his opinion, the little witches in Hogwarts Castle were probably not as good as either Irina or Hermione. After all, Hermione had mastered the wandless casting of several spells and the silent casting of dozens of spells in Irina's private tutoring. Although Irina did not hide anything from Harry and Ron in teaching spells, their casual personalities made them only learn the disarming charm and the silent casting of less than 10 spells even with Irina's help. However, even so, Harry and Ron's magic level is among the best among the young wizards in Hogwarts Castle. Of course, their theoretical knowledge is still as poor as ever. With his own level exceeding that of most of the young wizards in Hogwarts Castle, Harry naturally would not put himself on the same level as them, which is why he did not want to invite any of those little witches as his dance partner. At this moment, Harry suddenly looked at Hermione with hope and said, "Hermione, how about we make do with each other? It's just a dance anyway." Hearing Harry's words, Hermione was stunned. She snorted and seemed to be in a good mood. "Then let's make do." Now Hermione's magic level has reached the level of ordinary auras, and can even touch the threshold of elite auras. With her current strength, she naturally looks down on Crumb, who can't even cast spells without a wand. Therefore, when Crumb came to invite Hermione to the Christmas ball a few days ago, Hermione did not agree as in the original book, but after hesitating for a while, she rejected the invitation. After guessing that her best friend Irina would probably invite Lin to dance, and that their relationship would probably end up like this, Hermione decided not to attend the Christmas dance. She just wanted to sit in the audience and be a spectator, eating her best friend's gossip. However, she didn't expect her eldest son to invite her to be his dance partner. If it was Ron who invited her, Hermione might refuse. After all, she had no intention of going on stage. In addition, Ron was not a warrior, and there was no need for him to go on stage. She didn't have to put herself in a difficult position. But Harry, who was also her eldest son, was different. As a warrior, Harry had to lead the dance. If Harry couldn't even find a dance partner, he would be embarrassed. In order not to embarrass her eldest son, she could only put herself in a difficult position. At this moment, Harry, who thought he would be rejected mercilessly, suddenly raised his head. He looked at Hermione in surprise and said happily, "That's great, Hermione. After we finish dancing and completing the professor's task, we can go down and have a rest." Hermione nodded gently, smiled, and said, "At that time, we can just watch the fun of Irina and Senior All. I don't think Irina will choose anyone else except Senior All." As expected, the person who understands you has to be your best friend. Hermione had already guessed Irina's plan clearly. Chapter 328 Astoria Greengrass. Harry asked in surprise, "Are you so sure that Senior Owl will be with Irina?" Harry, who only knew how to play wizard chess with Ron, naturally didn't know Irina as well as Hermione. Even the other two little witches who shared the same dormitory with Irina knew about this, but Harry was so slow that he couldn't react at all. Of course, I guess Irina slipped out early in the morning to have a tryst with Senior Owl. Hermione's mouth corners were raised wildly, and she chatted with the two big boys about Irina's gossip. Hermione's weird smile made the little lions not far away look sideways and sigh. What a good girl, but it's a pity that her smile is too obscene. Just when Hermione wanted to continue sharing gossip, the door of the Gryffindor common room was suddenly opened, and Irina walked in with a smile on her lips. However, after hearing what Hermione, who had her back to her, was talking to Harry and Ron, the smile on Irina's face suddenly disappeared, replaced by a cold look. At this moment, seeing Irina coming, the desire to survive that kept warning them forced Harry and Ron to shrink into the sofa, trying to bury themselves in it, and quickly blinked at Hermione. "What's wrong with you? Is there something wrong with your eyes?" Hermione looked at Harry and Ron with a puzzled look, but Harry and Ron did not answer her words, but showed a look of horror. Just when Hermione felt at a loss, a cold voice made her whole body tremble. "Why, is it fun to talk about my things?" Irina's voice came from behind Hermione, and the bone-piercing cold made Hermione seem to be frozen, and her head turned around in a pause. After seeing the ice blade condensed in Irina's hand, Hermione smiled flatteringly. "That, Irina, you heard it wrong. That's right, you heard it wrong." Hearing this, Irina rubbed her hands together, making a series of crackling sounds, and she showed a smile that was extremely terrifying in Hermione's eyes. "Did I hear it wrong? I know it very well. Come back to the dormitory with me, Hermione. Let me love you well." As she said that, Irina dispersed the ice blade in her hand. She held Hermione's arm from behind and carried her towards the Gryffindor girls' dormitory. "Harry, Ron, save me." Hermione's weak voice floated from a distance. But Harry and Ron were both sitting on the sofa, watching their noses and their hearts, pretending not to hear Hermione's call for help. "Just kidding. At this time, it must be better to die than to die." On the other side, after Lin En returned to the Slytherin common room, Irwin found him. "Lin En, I have found a pureblood family that I can win over these days," Irving said straight to the point. Hearing Irving's words, Lin En looked at him in surprise. "This kid is good." At Lin's suggestion, Irving told her what had happened in the past few days. "It's like this. Some time ago, I met a little witch named Astoria Greengrass. During the conversation with her, I could feel that she was not as fanatical about the pureblood concept of the pureblood family as her sister Daphne Greengrass. Instead, she was quite disgusted by the tyrannical behavior of the you-know-who. According to what you said, Lin, we are not looking for allies with great strength, but like-minded partners. Therefore, after realizing that her ideas might be in line with our goals, I tried to contact her and learn more about her. From her mouth, I learned that the Greengrass family she belongs to has more extreme pureblood ideas, but it is not a mindless worship of the you-know-who. Moreover, the Greengrass family does not seem to have produced any Death Eaters. However, her sister Daphne Greengrass is a fanatical admirer of the you-know-who. In addition, Astoria and Daphne Greengrass are the only descendants of the head of the Greengrass family. They will need to compete for the position of heir to the Greengrass family in the future. In other words, if we can win Astoria as our partner and help her take the position, then we will be in control of the entire Greengrass family. Therefore, I think Astoria is very valuable to win over and cultivate. In order to get to know her better, I invited her to attend the Christmas ball with me yesterday, and she agreed. Irving said so, and after mentioning inviting Astoria to the Christmas ball, his face inexplicably blushed. After listening to Irving's story, Lin En looked at him strangely. If Malfoy knew that his future wife was snatched away like this, he would probably be so angry that he would collapse, cry and make a fuss. Alas, poor Malfoy could only hide in the quilt and whine. "So pitiful. Your analysis does make some sense. But she is only in the 2nd grade, you beast." Lin pointed at Irving and scolded bitterly. Irving scratched his head awkwardly and said, "It's obviously you who think too much. I invited her to the Christmas dance just to get more information. Please, I'm not a person who is tempted by beauty, okay?" Lin nodded seriously and said, "Well, it's not that I'm tempted by beauty, but I'm so bold." Irving slapped himself on the forehead, and he suddenly felt that his future was dark. Although he did have some good feelings for the little girl named Astoria, it was only because her thoughts were similar to his own. She was only in the 2nd grade. No matter how amazing her future appearance would be, she has not grown up yet. He wouldn't fall in love with a little girl, would he? Exclamation mark. He's not some hungry wolf that will eat anything. Feeling Irving's resentful gaze, Lin stopped joking. He said seriously, "Since you think she has the potential to become our ally, then go for it. If you have to sacrifice your looks, well, for the greater good, we will remember your sacrifice." Irving held his forehead with his hand. "Hey, do you have a problem with your understanding of stop joking?" Exclamation mark. Under Irving's speechless gaze, Lin really stopped joking this time. He asked, "By the way, have you ever tried to test her magic level? How is her magic level?" Although Lin values the ideological realm of his allies more, in this magical world where strength is paramount, Astoria's magic level is ultimately an issue that cannot be ignored. After hearing what Lin En said, Irwin seemed to have thought of something. he said with some amazement. Astoria's magic level? I can feel that her magic talent is extraordinary. I'm afraid she is only second to you and Irina. Can you believe that she can cast the two offensive magic spells, the cutting spell and the crushing spell, silently without any extracurricular tutoring? Chapter 329 I Wins Thunderbolt. After learning about Astoria's magic level, Lin En was also a little surprised. Although silent casting is not a difficult thing for Lin En, Irina and Irving, don't forget that Astoria is only in the 2nd grade now. Even when Lin En was in the 2nd grade, he could only perform a few silent castings of offensive magic, and he was not so proficient in the silent casting of ordinary life magic. Astoria, who is also only in the 2nd grade, has the ability to cast silently in these two, or perhaps not only these two offensive magics. This magical talent can be said to be amazing. Lin En did not expect that this little witch, who only had a few strokes in the sequel, and did not even appear in the original book, actually had such a talent. If Irving did not deceive him, and Irving himself was not deceived, then the little witch named Astoria Greengrass is indeed very valuable to win over. If this little witch can be trained well, then the help she can provide to them in the future may not be inferior to Irving. Thinking of this, Lin En said to Irving, "Very good, you should have more contact with her during the Christmas ball. If you are sure that she can be won over, then Irina and I will find a chance to meet her after Christmas." Irving nodded slightly and said, "Don't worry." Lin En asked, "Irving, how is your progress in learning the ancient magic called Thunderfall?" Hearing this, Irving said with some distress, "I can already summon thunder in a preliminary way, but there is a problem. That is, my summoning of thunder is based on the premise of casting the weather spell. I must first cast the weather spell to condense the thunder cloud before I can rely on the thunder cloud to send down the thunder. This is inconsistent with the method of summoning thunder described in the Thunderfall. In the ancient magic called Thunderfall, wizards can summon thunder in any situation, and from any angle. If the wizard needs it, he can even send thunder from his palm. But now, Irving can't even do a thunderbolt from the blue sky, let alone playing palm thunder. The thunder he can summon depends on the thunder cloud." Lin En thought for a moment and asked, "Can you still sense thunder without thunderclouds? In other words, when you cast the weather spell, will your perception of thunder disappear when the thunder clouds dissipate?" Irving closed his eyes, thinking back to when he cast the weather spell, and the closeness to thunder, and the control over it, that seemed to come from the bottom of his heart. Suddenly, he opened his eyes in surprise. At this time, they were in the Slytherin common room, under the ground of Hogwarts Castle. Logically, he should not feel any power related to thunder. However, Irving could sense that extremely weak thunder power, and the source of that thunder power seemed to be in himself. After realizing this, Irving quickly told Lin En about his discovery. Lin En lowered his head and pondered for a while, then said, "Is it from your own body? Feel it again. Is it from inside your body, or is it because you have been casting weather spells to summon thunder for many years, and the thunder power remains in your body?" Irving felt it again for a while, and said affirmatively, "I'm an ordinary wizard, and there is naturally no thunder power in my body. It seems to be the thunder power remaining in my wand and even on my clothes." As he said, Irving raised his left hand, trying to sense the weak thunder power remaining on the wand, and control it with silent casting. After a while, a weak arc flashed in Irving's left hand. Although the arc appeared only for a moment, it made Irving show ecstasy. Releasing arcs without casting weather spells, or even in a room without any thunder power, isn't this the key to the ancient magic of Thunderfall? Exclamation mark. Iwin kept trying to summon thunder, and the flashing arc became brighter and brighter, and some thunder that did not exist in his wand, but condensed out of thin air gradually flashed in his left hand. However, the power of thunder did not continue to expand as Iwin imagined, but after filling his palm, it seemed to reach a limit, and could not continue to expand. These thunders flashing in Iwin's palm were not very powerful. Even if Iwin shot them out, they could only break a vase at most. I can sense that the upper limit of the thunder power you can summon through the Thunderfall spell seems to be proportional to the thunder power remaining in your wand. In other words, as you continue to cast the weather spell to summon more thunder, let more thunder power remain in your wand, and the power of the pure thunder you summon through the Thunderfall spell can also increase accordingly. Lin observed the thunder flashing in Iwin's palm and said so. Irving nodded. He was aware of what Lin En said. According to the current progress, perhaps before the end of this school year, the power of the thunder he summoned through the Thunderfall spell will be comparable to the thunder he summoned when casting the weather spell. Continuously striking thunder and letting the power of thunder remain on his wand is equivalent to the act of these thunders recognizing him as their master. This is why Irving can rely on the power of thunder remaining on the wand to condense more thunder. If one day, Irving's Thunderfall spell can reach a great success, then the remaining thunder power will no longer stay on his wand, but will be integrated into his body. After all, the magic wand is an external thing, a tool to assist or strengthen spellcasting, and the real power of wizards is themselves. The joy on Irving's face became more and more intense. After he hurriedly said goodbye to Lin, he left the Slytherin common room. Looking at the direction he left, Lin could guess that Irving's purpose should be to go to the Black Lake to practice magic. As time passed, Christmas Day soon arrived. On this Christmas morning, the Hogwarts castle covered with snow was exposed to the sunshine of the rising sun. Many little wizards who originally liked to sleep in got up early today. Some people have come to the outside of the castle and took advantage of the good time of Christmas to play snowball fights with their partners, while more little wizards are nestled in their beds, smiling and opening their own birthday presents. Irina is naturally among them. Chapter 330, Fire Phoenix and Ice Phoenix. Irina quickly opened the Christmas gifts given to her by her family, professors, Harry and other Gryffindor lions, but she kept 2 gifts for last. They were the 2 gifts she was looking forward to the most. The 2 gifts came from her teacher Newt Scamander and her favorite Boyle and Rao. Irina first opened the gift Newt gave her, which was a tattered notebook. After opening the notebook, Irina was surprised to find that the notebook recorded all of Newt's experiences with the traceless stretch spell and portkeys. It is no exaggeration to say that if Irina practiced the traceless stretch spell and portkeys according to the methods and techniques recorded by Newt in this notebook, then she would probably only need less than a year to easily complete the production of cross-border portkeys with all triggering methods, and her attainments in the traceless stretch spell reached the level of Newt when he was young. Don't think that the attainment of the traceless extension spell can only be achieved when Newt was young, not now. Don't forget that, when Newt was young, he could use the traceless extension spell to expand the space inside a suitcase into a small world. Such a level of traceless extension spell is definitely enough for Irina. After receiving this precious gift, Irina's surprise was beyond words. In Newt's words and deeds in the last school year and summer vacation, Irina has laid a sufficient foundation in the traceless extension spell and portkeys, which means that it is effortless for her to understand the contents of this notebook. Irina carefully put away this somewhat worn notebook and then opened the Christmas gift that Lin gave her. In the gift box was an ice blue western dress, which was decorated with beautiful patterns. These patterns intertwined to form a phoenix pattern. Yes, this pattern is not the phoenix of Phoenix Fox, but a phoenix, a mythical creature in Oriental mythology. The inside of the dress is as soft as silk and feels smooth to the touch, while the outside is as thin as silk and can sway in the wind as the wearer moves. After picking up the ice blue dress, Irina saw a note at the bottom of the gift box. She picked it up and read the contents on the note. This is a dress made from some precious materials I found in Roll Castle, combined with my alchemy. I would like to call it Ice Phoenix Euphoria. You can try to put it on. I think you can feel that your control over the ice element should be about 1/10 higher than before. This is its first function. You don't have to worry about being too conspicuous if you keep wearing it to increase your control over the ice element. Ice Phoenix Euphoria has 2 forms. You can transform it into the form of an ordinary wizard robe as you wish and change it back to its original appearance when needed. This is its second function. As for the last function of Ice Phoenix Euphoria, it can carry your ice power and release it. If you inject the ice power into the phoenix pattern of Ice Phoenix Euphoria, it will also transform into a beautiful pattern of Ice Phoenix. After Irina finished reading this, her ice blue eyes lit up. She couldn't help but stand up, waving her wand to control the Ice Phoenix Euphoria to wear on herself. After wearing the Ice Phoenix Euphoria, Irina suddenly felt that her perception of the ice element was much clearer than before. You know, with Irina's own affinity for the ice element, it was enough for her to control the ice element. to appear in front of her with just one thought, which shows how strong her affinity for the ice element is. However, she, who already has such a strong affinity for the ice element, can feel that her perception of the ice element has improved and has even developed from quantitative change to qualitative change. How can she not be happy? Exclamation mark. After trying the first special effect of the Ice Phoenix Euphoria, Irina began to try the second effect of the Ice Phoenix Euphoria. With a thought, she imagined an ordinary wizard robe in her mind. The next moment, the Ice Phoenix Euphoria that she was wearing changed rapidly, and in just one breath, it turned into an ordinary wizard robe, and there was a Gryffindor school badge on her chest. Not bad. Not bad. Irina nodded with satisfaction and changed the Ice Phoenix Euphoria back to its original appearance. Just as Irina was about to inject the power of ice into the Ice Phoenix Euphoria and prepare to try the third special effect of the Ice Phoenix Euphoria, Hermione, who was sleeping on the bed next to her, sat up sleepily. After seeing the Ice Phoenix Euphoria on Irina, Hermione woke up completely. She opened her mouth wide, looked at Irina in disbelief, and asked, "Irina, where did you get this beautiful dress on you?" Although Hermione also prepared a beautiful dress for the Christmas ball, compared with the Ice Phoenix Euphoria that Irina was wearing, she seemed a little ashamed. Irina smiled and raised her head, and said with a bit of pride and joy, Lin En gave it to me. Are you jealous?" Hermione stared at the Ice Phoenix Euphoria on Irina, and nodded vigorously, saying, "I'm jealous." She had never seen such a beautiful dress. "I'm not jealous of it, it's Lin En gave it to me." Irina changed the Ice Phoenix Euphoria into an ordinary wizard robe and smiled happily. Hearing this, Hermione finally woke up from the temptation of Ice Phoenix Euphoria. She looked at Irina speechlessly and said, okay, I know you have a boyfriend who treats you well, okay." Hermione felt disgusted with Irina's behavior of showing off her boyfriend. On the other side, in the Slytherin dormitory, Lin En was also unpacking Christmas presents one by one. On the wall at the head of his bed, there was another Western-style dress made of black and red. This dress was also made of various precious materials and alchemy, and its name was Fire Phoenix Request. This Fire Phoenix Request was made together with the Ice Phoenix Euphoria that he gave to Irina, which was equivalent to a matching dress. This Fire Phoenix Request also had 3 special effects. Compared with the Ice Phoenix Euphoria, these 3 special effects were no different, except that the ice element was changed to flame. At this time, the number of Christmas presents in Lin En's hand was getting smaller and smaller, and soon there were only the last 2 left. These 2 Christmas gifts came from his teacher, Wallace & Green, and his favorite girl, Irina Lowell. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 331 Improved Blueprint, and Any Door Key. Lin En first opened the Christmas gift given to him by his teacher, Wallace & Green. The box containing this Christmas gift was very thin. It could be said that it was the thinnest of all the Christmas gifts he received this year. But instead of feeling unhappy, Lin En breathed a sigh of relief. Among the Christmas gifts given to him by so many people, the Christmas gift given by Wallace was the one that frightened him the most. The MK2 grenade 3 years ago, and the C4 plastic explosive last year both frightened him. The gift box of this Christmas gift was so thin, it couldn't be any munitions again, right? Exclamation mark. Thinking of this, Lin En's eyes showed some expectation. He opened the gift box and looked at the Christmas gift inside. Soon, a touch of ecstasy appeared on Lin En's face. There was a roll of parchment in the gift box. When Lin En spread out the parchment, he found that there was a drawing on the parchment. The line of big words above the drawing made Lin En feel very happy. The blueprint for improving the time loop array. After carefully putting away the blueprint, Lin En saw Valison's letter at the bottom of the gift box. Lin En picked up the letter and read it out. "Merry Christmas, Lin. I received your letter a few days ago. Your understanding of the time cycle array is deeper than I thought. This is the blueprint I improved again, based on the improvement plan you gave me. I hope it can be helpful to you." Putting down Valison's letter, Lin checked the blueprint. After reading it from beginning to end, there was only surprise on Lin's face. The help this blueprint gave him was not just a little, but a huge one. Although the improvement that Valison made, based on the improvement plan sent to him by Lin, was just to add to all chemical arrays and add a shell or container for all the physical or chemical materials including the sand of time, the improvement it brought was a qualitative leap. If the content of this blueprint can only improve the concealment and duration of the time loop array, Lin En might not be so excited. However, at the bottom of this blueprint, there is a line of small words. That is, if the time loop array is improved according to this blueprint, then the improved time loop array can deceive the perception of the Demon King level wizard. This is the most valuable part of this blueprint. You know, there is also a saying in the magic world that one force can break all laws, and the Demon King level wizard can also rely on his own powerful magic to perceive the possible ambush and forcibly destroy it with tyrannical force. And if the time loop array can deceive the Demon King level wizard, then the threat that the Demon King level wizard trapped in the time loop can bring will be much smaller. Lin En looked more carefully at the alchemical shell in the blueprint, or the refining process of the alchemical container, and the alchemical materials required. Although these alchemical materials were basically not sold in Hogsmeade Village, they were not very precious. Lin En only needed to ask the house elf Gale to pay more attention and place an order to buy the corresponding materials when they appeared on the market. According to Lin En's calculation, he should be able to collect all the materials after the Christmas holiday and start trying the improved time loop array. Putting away the Christmas gift given to him by teacher Wallison, Lin En opened the Christmas gift given to him by Irina with great anticipation. In the gift box with cartoon patterns given to him by Irina, there was a piece of ice that was emitting cold air, and under this piece of ice was a piece of paper. Lin read the words on the note. This is the first anywhere dorky I made with the help of my teacher. It is made of ice condensed by the power of ice. The reason why I call it anywhere dorky is that it has no fixed foothold. When you use it for long distance travel, you can inject magic power to trigger it and tell it the destination you want to go through your mind. It will take you to where you want to go. After learning the function of this piece of ice, Lin couldn't help but show amazement on his face. Although the dorky applied to this piece of ice is pure magic and does not contain any alchemy, the dorky alone can achieve an effect similar to the anywhere door, which has never existed in the original book. It seems that, even though Newt has lost his youth after decades, he is still as good as ever. After accepting Irina, a gifted disciple, he devoted all his life to teach her what he has learned. If Lin En's guess is correct, the concept of the anywhere door key, which has never appeared in the original book, is definitely not invented by Newt on the spur of the moment. It is likely that Newt once studied it, but it was interrupted for some reason. After accepting Irina as his apprentice, he put the research on the anywhere door key back on the agenda and invented it. The magic of the magic world is really not to be underestimated, Lin En exclaimed, and put away the anywhere door key with ice as the carrier. After opening all the Christmas gifts, Lin En got up from the bed, waved his right hand gently, controlled the fire phoenix to wear on himself, and changed into the form of an ordinary wizard robe with his mind. This transformed fire phoenix is no different from an ordinary wizard robe, and even wears a Slytherin emblem on Lin En's chest. Wearing the fire phoenix, Lin En walked out of the Slytherin dormitory. The day passed quickly. Most of the young wizards who stayed in school for the festival accompanied their dance partners and strolled around the Black Lake, the edge of the Forbidden Forest, and other places. Lin En and Irina were no exception. Soon, it was 7 o'clock in the evening. The young wizards quickly returned to their dormitories to change into their dresses. Lin En and Irina, who had already put on the Fire Phoenix QIU and Ice Phoenix UFA, but had changed their forms, naturally had no such concerns. They went directly to the lobby. Not long after, the lobby was also crowded with young wizards. They were all turning back and forth, waiting for 8 o'clock to come, because only then would the door of the auditorium open. In addition to the young wizards who were waiting, there were also some young wizards who were going to meet their dance partners from other colleges. They squeezed sideways in the crowd, looking for each other's figures. After a while, Fleur also came to the lobby. She was wearing a silver grey satin robe and looked very beautiful. Accompanying her was Roger Davis, the captain of the Ravenclaw Quidditch team. However, From the way Fearing occasionally looked at Lin, it could be seen that Roger Davis was just her backup plan when she had no other choice. Chapter 332 Fire Phoenix and Ice Phoenix, Romantic Dance Floor. After a while, Lin En and Irina found Iwin coming down the stairs. He was wearing a tuxedo with black as the main color and purple patterns, which looked very heroic. The one holding his hand was a little witch with a delicate face who was only as tall as Iwin's chest. The little witch was wearing a black and white long skirt that fell directly to her feet. If Lin En guessed correctly, the little girl following Iwin was Astoria Greengrass. At this time, the little wizards around looked at Iwin with disgust, and their eyes were full of condemnation. "You are a beast, to find a second-year little witch." Iwin turned a blind eye to these looks, or rather, he had gotten used to such strange looks during the whole day. "Lin, Irina." Iwin greeted Lin En and Irina. After seeing Lin and Irina, Astoria took the initiative to introduce herself. Senior role, Senior Lowell. "Hello, my name is Astoria Greengrass. You can just call me Astoria. I have heard about your deeds in the castle, and I admire you very much." Hearing this, Lin and Irina just smiled and greeted the two, saying Merry Christmas to each other, and didn't say much. After Iwin, the last warrior who had not arrived also came, and Harry and Hermione came down the stairs, and Hermione's appearance in a dress was shocking. Hermione's hair was no longer as messy as before, but became soft and shiny, and tied into an elegant bun behind her head. She was wearing a robe made of flowing light purple blue fabric. Even her temperament has changed drastically, as if she has become a different person. Not long after Harry and Hermione arrived, it was 8 o'clock, and the door of the hall was opened. Professor McGonagall's voice came out, "Please come over here, warriors." Hearing Professor McGonagall's words, Lin and Irina, Harry and Hermione, Fleur and Roger Davis, Crumb and another Slytherin which they didn't know, all came to Professor McGonagall. At this time, Professor McGonagall was wearing a red plaid robe, and a circle of ugly thistle wreaths decorated on the brim of her hat. She asked everyone to wait by the door and let the other little wizards go in first. After the other little wizards were seated, they lined up and walked into the hall. When the 4 warriors and their dance partners walked into the hall and walked towards a large round table in front of the hall where the referee was sitting, the people in the hall applauded enthusiastically. The walls of the Christmas hall were covered with glittering silver frost, the ceiling was a starry night sky, and there were hundreds of mistletoe branches and ivy wreaths hanging. The 4 school tables disappeared, replaced by 100 small tables with lanterns, and 10 people sat at each table. This year's Christmas dinner was different from previous years. Even the little wizards had exclusive ordering qualifications. They kept shouting out the names of dishes, and had a lot of fun. After the dinner, the Weird Sisters dance troupe, which many little wizards had been looking forward to, took to the stage. They performed passionately, and the little wizards in the audience burst into thunderous applause and cheers. Not long after, the lanterns on the table went out, which also meant the beginning of the Christmas ball. Lin En and Irina stood up quietly and walked towards the dance floor. The seemingly ordinary wizard robes on them changed rapidly the moment they stepped onto the dance floor at the same time, turning into the Fire Phoenix QIU and Ice Phoenix Ufeli with exquisite patterns. The Fire Phoenix QIU on Lin En was mainly dark red, with red and golden red lines interweaving on the dress to form a pattern of a phoenix soaring in the sky. The phoenix looked lifelike, and a ruby was inlaid in the phoenix's eyes, making it even more dazzling. The Ice Phoenix Ufeli on Irina was mainly ice blue, with the lines like snow mountain elves interweaving to form an equally lifelike phoenix. The ice blue gem hung in the position of the phoenix's eyes, shining brightly. The scene of Lin En and Irina changing clothes instantly attracted the attention of all the little wizards. They were amazed, cheered, and envied the beautiful dresses at the same time. "Change clothes instantly. Coach, I want to learn." "Get out of the way, I want to learn too." "What a beautiful dress. If I can get one, I will have no regrets in my life." Amid the exclamations of the little wizards, Lin En and Irina had already slid into the center of the dance floor, dancing to the symphony of music. Beautiful dances were presented in front of everyone, and Lin En and Irina, who were responsible for presenting the dances, looked at each other's eyes passionately and saw their own reflections in each other's eyes. They danced selflessly, with only each other in their eyes and nothing else. As time passed, pairs of little wizards slid into the dance floor and began their own dances, but no matter how well they danced, they could not cover up the brilliance of Lin En and Irina. Inject the power of ice into the Ice Phoenix Yuffie. There will be a surprise. After a body exchange, Lin En leaned over and whispered in Irina's ear. Hearing this, Irina nodded in trust and mobilized a wisp of ice power to inject into the Ice Phoenix Yuffie. At the same time, Lin En injected a wisp of Gubule fairy fire into the Fire Phoenix. The next moment, the entire dance floor was enveloped by two dazzling lights. The Fire Phoenix on Lin En seemed to have life. The blazing flames bloomed on his clothes. A pleasant phoenix cry came out in the glow of the fire. A phantom of a fire phoenix suddenly rose from the bottom of Lin En's feet, passed through Lin En's body, and flew to the ceiling full of stars. In front of Lin En, the ice blue light also lit up on Irina's Ice Phoenix Yuffie. The Ice Phoenix seemed to be injected with soul and life. Endless ice mist spread out, covering the entire dance floor in an instant, making the entire dance floor bloom with a hazy and dreamy light between red and blue, which seemed extremely romantic. What was surprising was that although the ice mist spread to people, they did not feel the slightest bit of cold. Then, in the icy mist, a clear phoenix cry followed the previous phoenix cry. A phantom of an ice phoenix suddenly rose from Irina's feet and flew through Irina's body into the sky. The Fire Phoenix and the Ice Phoenix intertwined and entangled, and finally turned into ice and fire that scattered in the starry sky displayed on the ceiling. Chapter 333, Uninvited Visitors in Azkaban. The melodious chirping of the phoenix and phoenix echoed in the dance floor for a long time, drowning out the rock music of the Weird Sisters and the cheers of the little wizards, as if the entire auditorium had become the world of the Fire Phoenix and the Ice Phoenix. All the brilliance in the dance floor was covered up, and the boys and girls with flames and ice on their bodies danced to their heart's content, as if they had become the center of the world, showing their own brilliance. The phantoms of the Fire Phoenix and the Ice Phoenix appeared again from the Fire Phoenix Qiu and the Ice Phoenix Yuffie, flying behind Lin En and Irina respectively, entangled with Lin En and Irina's movements, giving people a lingering feeling. At this time, the stage was already covered in red and ice blue, and whether it was the people in the audience or the people who had already slid into the dance floor to dance, they all seemed to be immersed in a dream composed of fire and ice. After an unknown amount of time, people finally woke up from this dreamlike scene. They no longer stared at Lin En and Irina dancing, but slid into the dance floor with their partners, and began their own dance. This Christmas dance lasted for a long time, until midnight, when the Weird Sisters stopped playing, and walked off the stage, and the Christmas dance ended. After the music stopped, Lin En and Irina also ended their dance, but their eyes still stayed on each other's eyes, trying to see their reflections in each other's eyes. Go back. Lin En leaned over, and whispered in Irina's ear. Irina shook her head gently, her clear eyes staring at Lin En, and whispered, I don't want to go back to rest. Lin En understood, and he said, then, let's go to the room of requirement to rest? Hearing Lin En's words, Irina's pretty face blushed, but she did not refuse, but nodded. So the two came to the outside of the room of requirement together. I need a place to rest. Lin En walked back and forth 3 times at the door of the room of requirement. Then, a wooden door wrapped in red silk appeared on the originally blank wall. Lin En opened the door for Irina. After Irina walked into the room of requirement, he stepped into the door and closed it. This time, the room of requirement was in the form of a bedroom. In the center of the room was a soft big bed. The bed was so big that it could easily accommodate 2 people. Then, let's rest, Irina said softly, waving her wand to turn off the lights on the wall. On Christmas, a happy night in the hearts of most wizards, something that almost no one wanted to see happened in another corner of the British wizarding world. On an island in the cold waters of the North Sea of Britain, countless black shadows were floating in the air. They surrounded a fortress built on the island, and kept approaching the fortress, to absorb some of the nutrients they needed. Yes, this island is the Azkaban prison in the British wizarding world. Azkaban originated in the 15th century, but it was not originally used as a prison. The first fortress built on Azkaban was originally the home of an unknown dark wizard who called himself Axtis. Axtis's magic power was extremely powerful. It was said that he had reached the level of a Demon King level wizard, but his nationality was unknown. Axtis mastered the most evil black magic, and also lured tortured, and killed muggle sailors passing through here, and took pleasure in it. The wizards in the British wizarding world believed that he had become mentally ill, and it was not until after his death that the spells he cast lost their effectiveness due to the depletion of stored magic power. The British Ministry of Magic then realized the existence of this island and building. All the wizards sent to Azkaban to investigate were only willing to mention that the place was full of dementors afterwards, and refused to disclose more information. Many authorities believed that Azkaban was an evil place, and it was best to destroy it, but many people were also worried that after the building was destroyed, the dementors living in the nest would swarm out, and the consequences would be disastrous. These artificially created dark creatures are powerful enough that they cannot be killed, so some people worry about what kind of horrific revenge the dementors will launch if their original active habitats are taken away by wizards. Every wall of Azkaban is filled with torture and pain, and the dementors rely on these emotions to survive. Those wizards who have studied this fortress and the dark magic in depth claim that the connection between the two is too deep, and any wizard who tries to destroy the building may be angered and retaliated by the dementors. Because of this, the fortress has been abandoned for many years, and continues to raise a large number of dementors. It was not until a tough minister of magic came to power that he ignored all opposing proposals and chose to use Azkaban as a wizard prison, which reactivated the island that had been abandoned for many years. By the way, the last name of the dictatorial minister of magic is Raoul. Of course, after so many years, the influence that Raoul could bring has long been eliminated in the long river of time. Now the staff of the Ministry of Magic who are willing to work for the Raoul family are all based on the benefits promised by the Raoul family in the background of its pure-blood family, rather than the Minister of Magic who has been dead for who knows how many years. At this time, 2 or 3 miles south of Azkaban prison, a dilapidated boat, driven by magic, staggered through the pouring rain and the crazy surging sea water, constantly approaching Azkaban. There was only one figure on this dilapidated boat, a young man in tattered clothes. He did not look ugly, on the contrary, he was a little handsome, but the crazy look on his face made him look particularly creepy. Yes, the identity of this young man was Professor Moody, who left Hogwarts Castle on the pretext of going home for the holidays, or Barty Crouch Jr. Today, Barty Crouch Jr. has removed the disguise of the Polyjuice potion and returned to his original appearance, and Professor Moody's wand was held in his hand. As the boat under his feet kept approaching Azkaban, the whole picture of the port of the small island gradually appeared in his field of vision. It was a very dilapidated small port, and on the port stood 2 auras holding wands. Who is it? At this time, the 2 auras seemed to have discovered the uninvited visitor. They raised their wands that released the glow spell and let the white light hit Barty Crouch Jr.'s face. Looking at the auras who were watching him vigilantly in the distance, Barty Jr.'s mouth curled up into a crazy smile. He raised his wand, pointed it at one of the auras, and shouted wildly, "Avada Kedavra! Avada Kedavra!" Chapter 334, Prison Break, Rebellious Dementors. With a flash of green light, the aura on the left fell to the ground, lifeless. Damn it, there's an enemy attack. The other aura's pupils dilated when he saw this scene. He shouted loudly, and at the same time, waved his wand to cast a silent stunning spell at Barty. However, this clumsy spell could not hit Barty at all. Barty just turned his head slightly, and dodged the aura's disarming spell. Avada Kedavra. Barty waved his wand again, and another dark green beam burst out from his wand and hit the aura's chest. The aura's body fell down with a bang. There was no power in this dilapidated port to stop Barty from going ashore. Barty pressed his left hand on the board and injected magic power into the dilapidated boat again, allowing the boat to sail to the port at a faster speed. Soon, Barty Jr. jumped onto the port and came to the island. But just as he was about to walk towards Azkaban prison, where the prisoners were held, a stream of white light approached quickly with the sound of footsteps. Then, about 20 auras ran over from the direction of Azkaban prison and stood in front of Barty Jr. vigilantly. Looking at these auras who were more than 20 times his own, Barty Jr.'s face was not nervous at all. Today's British Ministry of Magic does not attach much importance to Azkaban prison. Before Sirius escaped from prison, there were less than 10 auras stationed in Azkaban prison. Even now, these 20 auras are ordinary auras, and there is not even one elite aura among them. In fact, most of the auras who can be sent to guard Azkaban prison in the British Ministry of Magic are auras who have been excluded, ignored, or offended their superiors in the aura office. Rather than being sent to guard Azkaban prison, they are exiled here. And how can such auras have the strength of elite auras? Exclamation mark. After all, there are less than 10 elite auras in the entire aura office. There are still so many fugitive dark wizards in the British magic world. The aura office does not use these elite auras, but sends them to the poor and remote Azkaban prison. Isn't that a complete brain disease? Exclamation mark. Someone wants to break into the prison. Stop him. Expelliarmus. An aura shouted loudly after seeing the bodies of 2 colleagues at the port. He waved his wand and cast a disarming spell in the direction of Barty the Younger. Hearing the words of this aura, the other 20 or so auras also drew out their wands and cast disarming spells in the direction of Barty the Younger. However, facing the red beams coming from the sky, Barty the Younger seemed to be dancing a waltz. His feet kept moving, and he dodged most of the disarming spells with an extremely elegant posture. The wand in his hand did not stop. He kept pointing the wand in front of himself, releasing the armor charm that only covered a small area, and used the invisible shield to deflect the disarming charm that he could not dodge. Seeing that the disarming charm of more than 20 people on his side was easily blocked by Barty, the auras were all shocked. When the auras were shocked, Barty's counterattack began. He laughed wildly, and the madness in his eyes became more and more intense. Avada Kedavra. Avada Kedavra. Avada Kedavra. Barty released a series of Kedavra curses, and a series of dark green beams bombarded the auras, taking their lives. In less than 30 seconds, the original team of more than 20 auras, now nearly half of the auras, died under Barty's Kedavra curse. Damn it. Lift all restrictions. If the ministry holds me accountable, I will take the responsibility alone. The aura who seemed to be the head of this aura team shouted loudly. As the aura leader finished speaking, the remaining dozen auras attacked without any scruples. Avada Kedavra. Avada Kedavra. Avada Kedavra. These auras used the Kedavra curse to attack Barty Jr. After all the restrictions were lifted, their attacks were no longer as conservative as before, but became unbridled. In an instant, a sky full of dark green beams of light danced in front of the Azkaban prison, and the entire Azkaban prison was illuminated by the green light of the Kedavra curse. More than 100 meters away, a wizard wearing the uniform of the Daily Prophet looked at everything happening in the distance in horror. He used a magic camera to record everything that happened here. After the green lights flying all over the sky gradually disappeared, looking at the aura team in the distance that was almost dead or injured, the wizard gritted his teeth, resisted the fear in his heart, and waved the magic wand in his hand. Apparition. With a flash of white light, the wizard's body twisted rapidly on the spot and finally disappeared on the spot. Azkaban prison did not have an anti-apparition spell, but the coordinates here were hidden by magic, so that other wizards could not directly reach here through apparition, but the wizards here could leave through apparition at any time. As for the prisoners in the prison, the auras did not believe that these prisoners who had lost their wands and even had their happiness sucked away by dementors could apparition and escape without wand casting. At this time, the auras in front of Azkaban prison had been killed by Barty Jr., and his eyes were full of blood after using the killing curse many times in succession. Thunder explosion. Barty Jr. threw out an explosive spell, which blew open the door of Azkaban prison. Then, a series of black shadows flew out of Azkaban prison. These were the dementors responsible for guarding Azkaban prison. These dementors looked at Barty Jr., the uninvited guest, and rushed towards Barty Jr. like sharks seeing blood. However, just when these dementors wanted to absorb Barty's happiness, Barty waved his wand, and a burst of black air burst out, temporarily forcing the dementors back. I'm the messenger sent by my master, the Dark Lord. Do you want to have the freedom to hunt in Britain, and no longer live in this place without sunlight? Barty sneered at the dementors. Hearing Barty's words, the dementors hesitated. They stopped attacking Barty and made some ambiguous sounds. Submit. Submit to the great Dark Lord. This world will belong to the Dark Lord and to you. Barty said madly, with a bit of fascination on his face, and he approached the direction of the dementors step by step. Looking at Barty walking towards them, the Dementors hesitated for a while, and finally made way, watching Barty walk towards Azkaban prison. Chapter 335, Daily Prophet's front page news. Tear apart. Barty Jr. ignored the captured dark wizards on the first floor of Azkaban prison. He went all the way to the top floor of the fortress, where the most dangerous prisoners were held, namely the Death Eaters of the past. He chanted a spell towards the locks of the prison cells. Grey rays of light burst through the air, smashing the locks of the prison cells, holding the Death Eaters one by one, and releasing the Death Eaters locked behind the iron bars. Barty Jr., did the Master ask you to save us? Is the Master back? Just as Barty Jr. was looking at the emaciated Death Eaters who had been released, and were almost drained of their vitality, and was about to say something, a dry hand grabbed his ankle, and a crazy voice came from under his feet. Hearing this, Barty Jr. lowered his head, and he saw a disheveled woman with sickly pale skin and almost sunken eyes, who was grabbing his ankle at this time, and her face was full of madness. Barty chuckled at the woman and said, "Oh, Bellatrix, I haven't seen you for so many years. Have you lost your noble upbringing? Of course, I was sent by the Master to welcome back you loyal subordinates. Now, the Master needs you." Hearing Barty's words, the Death Eaters all raised their heads, staring at Barty with bloodshot eyes. With crazy faith, they shouted, "I'm willing to die for the Master." The next day, in the room of requirement at Hogwarts Castle, Lin and Irina woke up from the bed with sleepy eyes. Compared with the Slytherin dormitory or the Gryffindor dormitory, the undisturbed environment of the room of requirement made them feel more comfortable. They slept in each other's arms on this soft big bed last night, but they didn't do anything they shouldn't do. Those things were still too early for them. After all, they were only 14 or 15 years old this year, and they were far from the age to do those things. Although the West is more open in these aspects, and Lin En and Irina also come from the more open 21st century, for them, confirming their relationship and sleeping in each other's arms is the maximum they can accept. "Good morning, Irina." Lin En leaned over and kissed Irina's forehead gently, saying in a soft voice. Feeling the moist warmth on her forehead, Irina yawned like a kitten, then subconsciously stretched out her hands to wrap around Lin En's neck, and sat up under the influence of Lin En's body. "Well, good morning," Lin En, Irina said softly. She seemed a little sleepy, and her whole body shrank rapidly when she turned over, and finally turned into a cute little snow fox, and huddled in the quilt. Seeing this scene, Lin En smiled knowingly. He fell to the side, and his body changed at a speed visible to the naked eye. The next moment, a snow wolf appeared beside the little snow fox's pillow. Lin En raised a wolf paw and placed it on the little snow fox, and then fell asleep again with the little snow fox. It was not until noon that Lin En and Irina woke up completely. They returned to human form from their animagus form, and washed their faces, and brushed their teeth in the small bathroom, transformed by the room of requirement. After washing, Lin En and Irina left the room of requirement, and went to the auditorium, to enjoy lunch under the envious eyes of the little wizards along the way. Although the number of little wizards who participated in the Christmas ball yesterday was large, most of the dancing partners separated from them after the end of yesterday. The number of people who could really form pairs and become real lovers through this Christmas ball can be said to be very small. Therefore, seeing Lin En and Irina sticking together openly, looking like a pair of fairy lovers, these single little wizards were all envious. Today is a good day. Everything you dream of can come true. Just as Lin En and Irina were eating lunch and humming a song, a flash of fire flashed in front of them, and the Phoenix Forks appeared in front of them. Irina looked at Fawkes curiously. She gently touched Fawkes' head and asked, "What's the matter, Fawkes?" Irina's magical animal affinity talent was also effective for the Phoenix Forks. Fawkes not only did not resist Irina's impolite behavior, but rubbed her palm with his head, and then put a piece of paper in his mouth into Irina's hand. When he put down the paper, another flash of fire flashed, and Fawkes disappeared again. Irina opened the paper, and saw a line of words on it. "Come to the principal's office, as soon as possible." Seeing that the handwriting on the paper was obviously Dumbledore's, Lin En and Irina were both stunned. The originally happy expression disappeared, replaced by a touch of nervousness. "Professor Dumbledore asked us to go to the principal's office. Did something bad happen again?" Irina frowned. Lin put down the fried potato she had not finished eating, stood up, and said, I don't know. Since we have almost finished eating, let's go directly to Professor Dumbledore to ask. I think it may be related to Professor Moody who went home for the holidays. The two were in the auditorium. Unsure whether there were ears on the other side of the wall, Lin did not call Barty Crouch Jr. by name, but called him Professor Moody. Hearing this, Irina also put down the food in her hand. After wiping the food residue from the corner of her mouth with a handkerchief, she followed Lin and quickly went to the principal's office on the 8th floor. When Lin and Irina arrived in front of the stone statue outside the principal's office, just like last time, the stone statue took the initiative to withdraw to the side and made way for the principal's office. The two came to the door of the principal's office through the spiral staircase. The door of the principal's office was open at this time. Through the door of the principal's office, you can see that the portraits of the former principals on the walls around the principal's office are all awake. The former principals in these portraits are arguing loudly about something, and Dumbledore sits on a chair behind the desk, listening to the words of these former principals and responding from time to time. After seeing the arrival of Lin and Irina, Dumbledore waved his wand and conjured two teacups on the other side of the desk, inviting the two to sit opposite him. With Lin and Irina sitting down, the portraits of the former principals around them stopped arguing, but turned to whispering and watching the three people in the principal's office. Not far away, Fox, standing on a golden shelf, also looked in the direction of the three people, with flames burning around it. Professor Dumbledore, what happened? Lin asked straight to the point. Dumbledore did not answer him directly, but placed a copy of the Daily Prophet in front of Lin and Irina, motioning them to take a look. Lin and Irina leaned over and saw a line of big words on the front page of the Daily Prophet. Azkaban was robbed, Aurors were killed or injured, and Death Eaters all escaped. Chapter 336 I want to make Voldemort my stepping stone. Below this line of title, there is a picture. In the picture, green light representing the killing curse is flying all over the sky. One Auror after another was hit by the killing curse and lost his life. Below the picture, there is a text message recording that Azkaban prison was invaded by a powerful Death Eater. After killing all the Aurors, the Death Eater released the other Death Eaters in Azkaban prison. The only thing to be thankful for is that the Death Eater only released the Death Eaters imprisoned in Azkaban prison and ignored the other Dark Wizards. Otherwise, if all the prisoners imprisoned in Azkaban prison came out, I'm afraid that the British wizarding world would usher in chaos. The date on this Daily Prophet is tomorrow. It seems that this is a Daily Prophet that will be issued tomorrow, and Dumbledore didn't know how he got it in advance. That person is Barty Crouch Jr. Lin carefully identified the Death Eater who killed more than 20 Aurors by himself in the picture, and finally confirmed his identity. Dumbledore nodded slightly and said, it seems that Barty Jr. asked to go home for Christmas, probably to go to Azkaban prison and rescue those Death Eaters. After getting this information, Irina clenched her fists and said with some self-blame, damn it, I should have acted more quickly that day and killed the remaining 6 Death Eaters instead of leaving them to the Aurors of the Ministry of Magic. Isn't this letting the tiger go back to the mountain? Hearing this, Lin shook his head and said, those 6 Death Eaters don't have much strength. Even if they are released, they won't cause much trouble. What we really need to pay attention to are those Death Eaters like Barty Jr., whose magic level is comparable to that of elite Aurors. As Lin said this, he pointed to the dozens of photos of Death Eaters who were arrested and imprisoned more than a decade ago printed at the bottom of the Daily Prophet. In these photos, there are August Rookwood, Antonin Dolohov and Bellatrix Lestrange. In addition to these Death Eaters, many photos of Death Eaters were published in the Daily Prophet. This time, the number of Death Eaters released by Barty Crouch Jr. is as high as more than 30. If I'm not mistaken, the reason why Barty released these Death Eaters is to support Voldemort on the day when Voldemort is resurrected, and even to quickly devote himself to Voldemort's cause of ruling the British wizarding world again. After all, no matter how powerful a commander is, it is fake. Only with enough loyal subordinates can he expand his rule. Lin said in a deep voice. Irina looked at Lin worriedly and said, Lin, isn't it too much for you to face so many powerful Death Eaters alone, plus the resurrected Voldemort? Otherwise, when it comes to the last task, I will find a chance to sneak into the maze and take the goblet of fire with you to Little Hangleton village. How about that? Long after confirming that the Triwizard Tournament was a conspiracy, Dumbledore told Lin and Irina the contents of the remaining 2 tasks of the Triwizard Tournament. Therefore, Irina had sufficient reason to know about this and could tell it to Dumbledore. Dumbledore also looked at Lin in agreement and said, "Irina is right. You can leave the task of capturing Barty Crouch Jr. to me. After I control Barty Crouch Jr. and hand him over to Severus, I will let Fawkes take me to find you." Facing the persuasion of Irina and Dumbledore, Lin shook his head again and said, "No, don't leave it to Professor Snape. I need Professor Dumbledore and Irina to obtain all the information through legilimency immediately after catching Barty Jr. and then kill him. We must make sure that Barty Jr. is dead and not give him a chance to turn over. As for facing Voldemort and the more than 30 Death Eaters, perhaps I'm far from being able to defeat them, but if I just want to contain them, I don't think I will have much of a problem. Don't forget, my forbidden fire can seal the magic power of wizards. Even for powerful Death Eaters like Barty Crouch Jr. and Bellatrix Lestrange, I can seal most of their magic," Lin said seriously. After hearing this, Dumbledore and Irina hesitated for a while and finally agreed. However, what Lin En said next shocked Dumbledore and Irina. "After you finish dealing with the things in Hogwarts Castle and come to help me, I hope that Professor Dumbledore can stay put for now. Irina, you will be responsible for killing those Death Eaters with Irving, who came with you, and don't interfere in the battle between me and Voldemort. I want to try to fight against the Demon King level wizard," Lin En said. Dumbledore frowned and looked at Lin En, saying, "Lin En, you have to know that the gap between Demon King level wizards and ordinary wizards is huge. Even if you are only one step away from Demon King level wizards, as long as you have not reached Demon King level wizards, then you are no different from ants in front of real Demon King level wizards." Hearing Dumbledore's words, Lin En grinned and said, "Of course I know this, Professor Dumbledore. However, on the night of the Quidditch World Cup, after I fought with those Death Eaters and the Auras who came and misunderstood me, I had a vague feeling. If I'm not mistaken, that was my opportunity to break through to the Demon King level wizard. I think I need a real battle, a hearty life and death battle. Only under strong pressure can I survive and break through the existing magic power in one fell swoop and reach the realm of Demon King level wizards like you and Voldemort. Only in this way can we have enough capital in the future to fight Voldemort," Lin En said lightly. Irina looked at Lin En with a complicated expression. It was not long since she reached the magic level of Elite Aura, and the boy she loved most had already touched the threshold of Demon King level wizards. Is the gap between them going to be widened again? Exclamation mark. She was finally catching up with him. Irina shook her head vigorously, and her eyes looking at Lin En became clear again. She was such a bad girl. It was obviously a good thing that Lin En became stronger. She should be happy. At this time, Dumbledore looked at Lin En with an equally complicated expression. He said with some difficulty, "Lin En, what do you mean?" Before Dumbledore finished speaking, Lin En had already guessed what he was going to say. Lin En nodded vigorously and said decisively, "Just as you thought, Professor Dumbledore. I want Voldemort to be my stepping stone and a tool for me to become a Demon King level wizard." Perhaps 3 or 4 years ago, the Demon King level wizard was still an unattainable existence for Lin En. No matter how powerful his magical talent was, it was impossible to achieve it with the limited magic power reserves of a young wizard. But now, his magic power reserves are close to those of an adult wizard, and he has the Philosopher's Stone as his backup energy source, and his attainments in magic are infinitely close to the level of a Demon King level wizard. For him now, the Demon King level wizard is no longer an unattainable existence, but an existence that is within reach in the haze. Chapter 337, For a Better Peace in the Magical World. Dumbledore frowned and said, "If you need to fight a Demon King level wizard as an opportunity to break through the Demon King level, you can let me be your opponent." In Dumbledore's view, as a Demon King level wizard, he can at least ensure the safety of Lin En's life by being Lin En's opponent and will not let Lin En die in the battle. But Voldemort is different. Voldemort is not an elder who is willing to train young people, but a crazy terrorist. Facing such an uncontrollable powerful existence, Lin En may be killed if he is not careful. "I know that you will not kill me," Professor Dumbledore, you will not really kill me. Since I know that you will not kill me, then I will lose my fear of death, and those who lose their fear of death will not have a real breakthrough in transcendence. Lin En said lightly. Hearing Lin En's words, Dumbledore and Irina were silent. In the end, the two agreed to Lin En's plan. Although Dumbledore and Irina were reluctant for Lin to make such a suicidal decision, since this was a path that Lin had chosen, as Lin's teachers and partners, they should respect Lin's choice. Put aside the plans for the end of the school year, regarding the content of the Daily Prophet this time, I think the Ministry of Magic should be putting pressure on them, hoping that they can change the content of the Daily Prophet to be published tomorrow, right? Lin asked. He did not doubt that the Ministry of Magic could get the Daily Prophet published the next day in advance through some channels like Dumbledore did, and once the Ministry of Magic got the newspaper, then given Cornelius Fudge's character, he would most likely not want to let this kind of news that might cause panic among the masses and cause his support rates to drop appear. Dumbledore looked at Lin unexpectedly, a little curious about how he knew this information, that even he had just learned from an old friend who worked at the Daily Prophet. Then, Dumbledore nodded and said, yes, after an employee of the Ministry of Magic took a copy of tomorrow's Daily Prophet in advance, Cornelius Fudge sent people to put pressure on the Daily Prophet, hoping that they would not publish this matter. Irina sneered and said, for the sake of his own support rate, Fudge even ignored the safety of the British wizarding world. He disregarded the safety of people's lives and only cared about his own power. Such a Minister of Magic will only destroy the British wizarding world. Dumbledore smiled without comment and did not speak, but turned his gaze to Lin. Lin said calmly, as journalists, their first priority is to present the facts and the truth to the public, rather than being intimidated by power. Of course, I understand that those people in the Daily Prophet may have to succumb to it for a living, and I will not embarrass them. However, I will let the Ministry of Magic staff who have interests with the Rowell family jointly protest against the decision of that stupid pig Fudge, and let the staff of the Daily Prophet bribed by the Rowell family protest at the same time. Many people have to succumb to fate in order to live. Lin was such a person in his previous life, so he understood their situation. But those wizards who received benefits from the Rowell family were not within Lin's sympathy. Since they took the benefits from the Rowell family, there was no reason to take the money and not do the work. Even if the bribed staff of the Daily Prophet secretly changed the template during printing, Lin would let the content of this Daily Prophet be presented to all wizards in the British magic world. Some people may ask, why Lin has to do this, and what does it matter whether a copy of the Daily Prophet is published or not? Exclamation mark. But in Lin's eyes, this means that the truth can be spread, and the British Ministry of Magic is doomed to be unable to cover up everything. Don't forget, he is not Dumbledore, not a rigid old madman described by Rita Skeeter who is willing to be bound by rules. Dumbledore clasped his hands together, and there seemed to be a light flashing in his eyes. He was thinking about something. Professor Dumbledore, we don't need to hide everything and solve it quietly by ourselves. Those auras in the Ministry of Magic are not freeloaders. Regardless of whether they can succeed, at least their actions can compress the living space of those Death Eaters to a greater extent, so that those Death Eaters can only survive and cannot seek big things. Irina seemed to see the hesitation in Dumbledore's heart, and she said seriously. Hearing what Lin and Irina said, Dumbledore sighed, nodded, and said, it seems that I'm really old. Lin, Irina, you are right. In order to deal with Voldemort, we must unite all the forces we can unite. Yes, the Ministry of Magic should be our friend, not our enemy. Hearing this, Lin said softly, but Cornelius Fudge is gradually turning the Ministry of Magic into our enemy. Irina held Lin's hand and said softly, if a soldier is rotten, the general will be rotten. If a Ministry of Magic is rotten from the root, how can we expect them to achieve great things? Find a suitable opportunity to get Fudge out of office. This is the best way for us to win the Ministry of Magic. Dumbledore had to admit that he was indeed persuaded. According to his original idea, he hoped to win the support of the Ministry of Magic by peaceful means. In the original book, he also ran to the Ministry of Magic every now and then to reason with Fudge and other high-level officials of the Ministry of Magic. However, Dumbledore in the original book did not succeed. He underestimated those people's desire for power and interests, and also underestimated the status of himself, who was already confused in the eyes of those people, as the greatest white wizard of the century. Perhaps, changing a leader, letting a more wise leader lead the British Ministry of Magic, the British government of the magic world, would be a better choice. Dumbledore thought so in his heart. His wish has always been to maintain the hard-won peace in the magic world, but if letting Fudge step down and replacing him with a better Minister of Magic is a better way to maintain peace, then he doesn't mind doing something that is not in line with the rules in the eyes of the world again. Thinking of this, Dumbledore was finally relieved. He smiled and said to Lin and Irina, "I understand. You can do it with confidence, Lin, Irina. Everything is for a better peace in the magic world." Dumbledore said so, but in his mind, the figure of a boy with blonde hair and heterochromatic eyes appeared inexplicably, and a sentence that was once spoken by him, but widely spread by the boy with blonde hair and heterochromatic eyes, for the greater good. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 338. She provoked someone she shouldn't provoke. After leaving Dumbledore's office, Lin and Irina continued to enjoy their Christmas vacation. However, unlike the peaceful Hogwarts castle, the British wizarding world far away from this ivory tower was in uproar. More than 30 vicious Death Eaters escaped from Azkaban prison, and more than 20 Aurors who were responsible for guarding the prison died at the hands of a Death Eater. All of this made the wizards in the British wizarding world unbelievable. They even thought that the Death Eater who killed more than 20 Aurors by himself was actually the resurrected Voldemort himself. For a time, everyone in the British wizarding world was in danger. They were all afraid that the Death Eaters would break into their homes in the middle of the night, kill their wives and children, and finally put a dark mark above the house. These wizards finally chose to turn their fear and panic into complaints against the Ministry of Magic, complaining that the Ministry of Magic failed to stop the Death Eaters' prison break, questioning the strength of the Ministry of Magic's Aurors, and thinking that, if they couldn't even guard a prison, how could they protect the British wizarding world? Exclamation mark. Almost every day, letters like flying snow were thrown into the office of the Minister of Magic, and the Minister of Magic Cornelius Fudge smashed dozens of valuable decorations almost every day. Those ignorant and hopeless guys actually stopped me from putting pressure on the Daily Prophet. Now that everyone is complaining about me as the Minister of Magic, those bastards are finally satisfied now. Fudge angrily smashed everything he could in the minister's office. He roared angrily, and his fat face turned the color of liver. The power of the Rowell family is so huge that, even though only Lin and his mother Rowena Rowell are left in the Rowell family, compared with those pure-blood families whose entire families have been sent to Azkaban, the Rowell family, which is still moving forward under the control of Rowena, a strong woman, can be said to be much stronger. Even if all the members of a pure-blood family like the Lestrange family, whose members are all Death Eaters, have been released by Barty Jr., it is still very difficult for them, who have just left Azkaban prison, to take back the industries that have been divided up by other pure-blood families. After all, as fugitives, they do not have the qualifications to appear in front of people openly. Now, even if the Black family, which only has Sirius, is much stronger than pure-blood families such as Lestrange after Sirius has taken back most of the industries belonging to the Black family in the past year. Under the wide-ranging network of the Rowell family, nearly half of the grassroots staff of the Ministry of Magic have received benefits from the Rowell family, and are willing to act as the eyes and voices of the Rowell family. Even 3 or 4 of the top officials in the Ministry of Magic have been bribed by the Rowell family. In this case, it would be too easy for Lin to stop Fudge from putting pressure on the Daily Prophet. Of course, even Lin had to stop at the right time in such matters. Otherwise, if Fudge was desperate, the Rowell family would not be able to get away with it. In this stormy situation, the British Christmas holiday soon came to an end. Wizards in the British magic world returned to their posts one after another, and classes at Hogwarts Castle resumed. However, in the first magical creature protection class after the holiday, when Irina, Harry and the other two came to Hagrid's hut and were about to start class, they found that the doors and windows of Hagrid's hut were tightly closed, and an elderly witch with short grey hair stood in front of Hagrid's hut. The witch looked at everyone and shouted, "Hurry up, hurry up, the class bell has rung for 5 minutes." Seeing this strange witch, Ron asked, "Who are you? Where's Hagrid?" The witch said simply, "I'm Professor Grubbly Plank, your substitute for care of magical creatures. Your Professor Hagrid is not feeling well, so I'll be the substitute for care of magical creatures during this period." With that, Professor Grubbly Plank led everyone to the class venue. After learning that Hagrid could not continue to teach care of magical creatures, Harry anxiously asked Professor Grubbly Plank, but she ignored Harry's question and thought Harry was meddling in other people's business. Instead, Malfoy approached Harry and Ron with a sneer on his face, as if he was laughing at something. However, Irina and Hermione ignored what happened to Harry and the others. Although they were also worried about Hagrid, the care of magical creatures class in front of them was undoubtedly more important. In Professor Grubbly Plank's class, she introduced the beautiful creatures of unicorns to everyone. These adult unicorns are snow white, and even the white snow on the ground looks a little grey in front of the unicorns. Taking off the filter of Hagrid, her friend, Irina had to admit that Professor Grubbly Plank's care of magical creatures class was much more interesting and useful than Hagrid's blasting-tailed Skrewts. Just as Irina finished the care of magical creatures class with satisfaction, Harry and Ron came over with gloomy faces and told her about Rita Skeeter's report in the Daily Prophet that Hagrid was a half-giant. It was not until then that Irina realized that Hagrid was not feeling well at all, but because Rita Skeeter told Hagrid's identity as a half-giant, causing Hagrid to resign out of shame. After learning this, Irina couldn't help but feel annoyed. Hagrid was her friend, but now, Hagrid was so upset because of a report by Rita that he wanted to resign. To be honest, if Professor Grubbly Plank and Hagrid competed on the same stage and finally won the position of Professor of Care of Magical Creatures, then Irina would gladly accept the arrival of this new professor. After all, he really taught better than Hagrid. But Professor Grubbly Plank became their substitute professor after Hagrid had to resign because of Rita Skeeter's conspiracy against Hagrid. In this case, Irina naturally hoped that her friend Hagrid would come back soon. Back at Hogwarts Castle, after watching Harry, Ron and Hermione indignantly scolding Rita Skeeter while heading to the Great Hall, Irina met Lin, who had also finished class and came to the castle gate to pick her up. "What's wrong? You don't seem very happy," Lin asked, looking at Irina's obviously unhappy look. Irina lowered her head and hesitated for a moment, then told her everything about the care of magical creatures class. In fact, rather than letting her bother Lin En with her own affairs, she would rather take revenge on Rita Skeeter in her own way, such as exposing her illegal animagus identity. But after remembering that the royal family behind Lin En was involved in the Daily Prophet, and Rita Skeeter might still be useful to him, Irina chose to tell Lin En the truth. After learning about what happened, Lin En's face also sank, but he did not show it. Instead, he gently patted Irina's back and said softly, "It's okay, you go to the auditorium to eat first, I'll go there later." Irina nodded, without saying much, and walked towards the auditorium. Lin En walked in another direction. He came to an empty corner, snapped his fingers, and said lightly, "Gale." Snap. With a bang, the house elf Gale appeared in front of Lin En. "Is there anything I can do for you, Master?" Gale bowed to Lin En and said. Lin En said indifferently, "Tell the editor-in-chief of the Daily Prophet who was bribed by us to put his reporter Rita Skeeter on ice for 6 months. As for the reason, she offended someone she shouldn't have offended." Chapter 339. She doesn't like this kind of good thing. Lin En did not intend to bang Rita Skeeter directly, even though the power of the royal family could do so. But now, Rita Skeeter still had value for him. It was enough to hide her for half a year, to let Rita realize her mistakes, and understand the horror of the royal family's power. After half a year, the timeline of the Order of the Phoenix arrived, and the value that Rita Skeeter could show might be more than Lin En imagined, which was why Lin En decided to hide her for half a year, instead of 1 or 2 years or even longer. "Yes, Master." Gale nodded, and without asking any more questions, he snapped his fingers again and disappeared from the spot with a snap. Looking at the place where Gale had stood before, Lin En was thoughtful. As early as before the beginning of this school year, Lin En had ordered Gale to be on standby at any time and appear when he needed him, just like 2 years ago to capture Dobby. Of course, Lin En did not want Gale to do anything, but purely as a messenger between him and the Roll family, so that his orders could be delivered to the people he wanted to send them to more quickly. Although Lin En and Irina still keep a little owl for emergency food, the instability coefficient of owl messaging is still too high compared to house elves. Rita Skeeter, you're unlucky to have offended Irina this time, but I hope you can understand what I mean, otherwise, Lin En muttered to himself, and finally, he chuckled and stopped staying here, but went towards the direction of the auditorium. In fact, Rita Skeeter did not subjectively want to offend Lin En and Irina. After all, she had long known the strength of the Roll family, so she would not do it for nothing. If she knew the relationship between Hagrid and Irina, she would not have written this report. Unfortunately, there is no F in everything. Rita suffered such a disaster not because her report offended anyone, but because she neglected to investigate the wizards involved in the report when she planned to issue this report. However, who could have thought that Hagrid would be Irina's friend and Irina would be Lin En's partner? Even if Rita thought about it, she probably couldn't imagine how Hagrid, a half-blood giant with no identity and no background, could make the Roll family stand up for him. After the dinner, Irina planned to go to Hagrid's hut with Harry and the others to visit Hagrid. However, no matter how Harry and the others knocked on the door of Hagrid's hut, the doors and windows of Hagrid's hut were still closed tightly, and even the curtains were replaced with dark, opaque ones, as if the owner of the house didn't want to see them. There was no way. After knocking on the door to no avail, Irina and the others could only choose to go back first and plan to go to Hogsmeade Village to look for Hagrid on Saturday. In Harry's impression, Hagrid would go to Hogsmeade Village to drink almost every weekend, sometimes in the Three Broomsticks bar, sometimes in the Hog's Head bar. If they went to look for him on the weekend, they would most likely run into Hagrid, who was drinking to relieve his sorrow. So, Irina, Harry and the others had to hold back their worries about Hagrid, their friend, and waited quietly for Saturday to come. On the second day of this magical creature protection class, in the newspaper office of the Daily Prophet, a tall and thin wizard walked through the corridor of the newspaper office and came to the room where reporters were writing. His eyes were cast on Rita Skeeter, who was sorting out the manuscripts in her hands. The wizard's name is Michelle Anderson, an editor-in-chief of the Daily Prophet. Because of his sharp insight into explosive news and a certain talent in divination, he has the nickname Golden Eagle in the news field of the British wizarding world. Michelle is a shrewd and witty wizard and has strong analytical and reasoning skills. He can even foresee some hazy future trends through divination. This is the basis for him to get the position of editor-in-chief in the Daily Prophet. There are 5 editors-in-chief of the Daily Prophet, and Michelle ranks second among the 5 editors-in-chief. Rita Skeeter, a reporter who has provided a lot of front-page news for the Daily Prophet, is a reporter under him. However, Michelle now has another new identity, that is, the secret line of the Roll family buried in the Daily Prophet, and can take action at any time for the orders of the Roll family. Rita Skeeter. Michelle walked into the room and looked at Rita coldly, and he said loudly. Hearing Michelle's voice, Rita subconsciously turned around, and after discovering that the person coming was Michelle, she couldn't help but frowned. You know, with her ability to create a lot of explosive news for the Daily Prophet, even her old boss Michelle used to want to hold her in his hands, and the other party never spoke to her in such a harsh tone. What's the matter, Mr. Anderson? Rita asked. Michelle sneered. If it were normal, he would be afraid that Rita, the cash cow, would melt even if he held her in his palm, but now, she has offended someone she shouldn't have offended, and even almost implicated herself. Michelle said calmly, put the manuscript in your hand aside for now. From today, the Daily Prophet will give you a half-year vacation. During this period, you don't have to come to the newspaper to work. Think carefully about how to write articles in the future. Hearing Michelle's words, Rita was stunned. She looked at Michelle in disbelief and asked, Mr. Anderson, are you crazy? How many explosive news have I provided to the Daily Prophet? And how many gold galleons have I earned for the Daily Prophet? And now you want to get rid of the donkey?" Michelle looked at Ritter with increasingly cold eyes. He said in a cold voice, "Letting you go home with paid vacation is the greatest kindness the newspaper has given you. Think carefully about who you have offended." After that, Michelle turned and left without giving Ritter a chance to refute. Only Ritter was left sitting in the chair in a daze, not knowing what she was thinking. Half a year of paid vacation. If this kind of thing fell on any of her colleagues, they would probably cheer all night. Who wouldn't love such a good thing? But she didn't love it. For Ritter, even if she only had half a year's salary, it would not be as much as the commission she earned from writing a report. But Michelle asked her not to come to the newspaper for half a year, which meant that she could not publish a single article in the Daily Prophet, nor could she earn any salary other than the basic salary of a copper nut. She was being hidden. Chapter 340. Something happened to old Batty. When she thought that in half a year, her former luxurious life would no longer exist, and she would have to live a tight life like her colleagues who couldn't even produce a few manuscripts that could pass the review, Ritter's fear and resentment became stronger. "Why did you hide me?" Exclamation mark. As the editor-in-chief of the Daily Prophet, what qualifications do you have to do this? You, who have never produced a hot news, why do you ignore my contribution to the Daily Prophet? Exclamation mark. Ritter stood up with increasing anger. She rushed out of the door and blocked Michelle, who was about to return to her office. She asked hysterically, "Mr. Anderson, why do you do this? Aren't you worried that I will switch to other newspapers and let them squeeze out the Daily Prophet? How can you take this responsibility on behalf of the Daily Prophet?" Faced with the threatening questioning in Ritter's words, Michelle was not worried at all. He looked at her coldly and said lightly, "If you dare to resign from the newspaper, then I swear in the name of Anderson that no newspaper in the entire British wizarding world will hire you except for the Quibbler, a newspaper that only fools read." Hearing Michelle's words, Ritter's face turned pale. As colleagues for so many years, she naturally knew Michelle, her old boss, inside out. She knew that the other party definitely did not have such a great power in the news field of the British wizarding world, otherwise Michelle would not have been the editor-in-chief of the Daily Prophet for so long. However, just as she knew Michelle's background, Michelle also knew how well she knew him. In this case, Michelle had no reason to deceive herself. This meant that the person who could make her lose her place in the news industry was not Michelle in front of her, but the person behind him. Ritter looked at him with pale lips and asked tremblingly, "Mr. Anderson, can you tell me who I offended? Even if I die, you have to let me die with a clear mind." Ritter knew in her heart that, since the person behind Michelle only wanted her to be hidden for 6 months instead of completely banning her, there must be room for things to turn around, or she could still be useful to that person. Seeing that Ritter seemed to understand something, Michelle finally chuckled, and his tone was no longer as cold as at the beginning. He said, "Think carefully, Ritter. What have you written in the Daily Prophet these 2 days, and what kind of background do those people who you offended in your writing have? Maybe this time it was just a warning from that person, but I'm afraid it won't be the case next time." Hearing this, Ritter's brain turned quickly. These 2 articles she published, in addition to the press release that mocked the Ministry of Magic for only doing research on crucibles, it seems that there is only one article that reveals the identity of the half-blood giant at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Wait, half-blood giant, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry? Exclamation mark. Ritter was shocked, and she suddenly remembered that the heir of the royal family she met after the first project of the Triwizard Tournament was a student of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Could it be that the half-blood giant has some friendship with that person? Exclamation mark. Ritter couldn't help but curse in her heart. Who could have thought that a half-blood giant could actually involve the heirs of those pure-blood families who valued blood the most? I see. Thank you for your reminder, Mr. Anderson. After sorting out what happened, Ritter sincerely thanked Michelle. She understood that this time she did not investigate the background of the interviewer clearly. On the other side, in Hogwarts Castle, as time passed, Saturday's Hogsmeade weekend soon arrived. After saying hello to Lin, Irina followed Harry, Ron, and Hermione to Hogsmeade Village to find Hagrid. The 4 of them first went to the Hogshead pub. They didn't have a good impression of this dirty bar. They came here first, just to take a look around. After confirming that Hagrid was not here, they could leave quickly and go to the Three Broomsticks pub to enjoy delicious butterbeer. Not long after, the group arrived at the Three Broomsticks pub. It seems that Hagrid is not here. Hermione glanced around the Three Broomsticks pub and said with some regret. Ron sighed and said, "Let's order 4 butterbeers and sit here for a while." Irina and Harry had no objection to Ron's plan. Since the last school year, Irina had hardly come to Hogsmeade with Harry and the others. She was mostly with Lin. In this way, she had indeed neglected the contact with these friends. Just as the 4 were about to find a place to sit down, Irina suddenly saw Ludo Bagman sitting in a seat in the distance, communicating with a group of goblins. At this time, Ludo seemed to have noticed Harry coming to the bar. He walked over and said happily, "Harry, how are you? Everything is going well. I just hope to meet you." Harry said, neither servile nor arrogant, "I'm fine, thank you." Ludo looked enthusiastic and said, "Harry, I wonder if I can talk to you alone for a few words? Can you give me some convenience?" Then, Ludo cast his eyes on Irina, Hermione and Ron. Hearing Ludo's words, Irina just said lightly, "If you have anything to say, you can just tell us directly. We are good partners." Hearing this, Ludo hesitated for a moment and finally took the 4 people to a corner of the Three Broomsticks. What Ludo wanted to say to Harry was not beyond Irina's expectations. He wanted to use his authority as the director of the Department of Sports and Physical Education of the Ministry of Magic to help Harry win the Triwizard Tournament, but Harry decisively refused. However, the information revealed in Ludo's words made Irina frown. That is, Barty Crouch Sr. has not appeared for 2 weeks. And these 2 weeks started from the Christmas holiday. Barty Crouch Sr. was under the imperious curse of Barty the Younger. This was what Lin told her on the night when the champions of the Triwizard Tournament were selected. And now, Barty the Older, who was under the imperious curse, disappeared for 2 weeks in a row. Could it be that something bad happened? Exclamation mark. Irina was thinking. For now, old Barty was the candidate she and Lin were planning to push to the position of Minister of Magic. If something happened to old Barty, then their plan would most likely be affected negatively. Chapter 341 Rescue Plan and the Puzzle in the Golden Egg. After leaving the Three Broomsticks and returning to Hogwarts Castle, Irina did not continue to go to Hagrid's hut with Harry and the others. Instead, she left Harry, Ron and Hermione's group with a heavy heart, saying that she was not feeling well. After watching Harry and the other 2 leave the castle and head towards Hagrid's hut, Irina took out a two-way mirror from her pocket and contacted Lin. "Lin, where are you? I learned from Ludo Bagman that old Barty hasn't appeared for 2 weeks. Combined with what you told me last time, that he was under the imperious curse, I suspect that he has been in trouble." Irina looked around, and after making sure that there was no one else around, she calmly told Lin the information she had obtained in Hogsmeade Village. On the other side of the two-way mirror, Lin En's expression gradually became serious. He only left one sentence and cut off the connection of the two-way mirror. "See you in the room of requirement." Irina put away the two-way mirror and headed for the stairs leading to the 8th floor of the castle. When she reached the 8th floor, she saw Lin En also cleverly arrived at the 8th floor from another staircase that originally led to the 7th floor. After the meeting, they came to the tapestry of the troll beating the fool Barnabas with a stick, walked through the blank wall 3 times in a row, and summoned the room of requirement in the form of a conference room. After entering the room of requirement, Lin En waved his wand, and 2 sets of tea sets flew out of his handbag that had been cast with the Traceless extension spell, and were placed in front of him and Irina. "What did Ludo Bagman say? Is there any deviation from the original plot line?" Lin En asked Irina while making tea. Irina carefully recalled Ludo's previous words, and then compared them with the already blurred storyline of the original work in her mind. She hesitated and shook her head, and said, "It seems that there is not much difference, but the plot of this year has already collapsed, hasn't it? All those Death Eaters escaped from Azkaban prison." Lin thought for a while and said, "For now, old Barty should still be of use to young Barty. If I'm not mistaken, in the upcoming second project, old Barty should appear as a referee." Hearing this, Irina's eyes lit up and asked, "So, do you plan to rescue old Barty after the second project is over?" Lin nodded slightly and said, yes, if I remember correctly, old Barty in the original book died after the second project. If we don't rescue him, I guess all we can see will be a corpse. Irina agreed with Lin's idea very much. After thinking of Barty Crouch Jr. who was still presenting himself as Professor Moody, Irina hesitated and said, but if we directly remove the Imperious curse on old Barty, I'm afraid young Barty will notice it. If he finds out that his identity has been exposed long ago, that would be bad. Lin chuckled and said, then you're worrying too much. We just think that something is wrong with old Barty, not that we found out that he was under the Imperious curse. Then we could have asked Dumbledore to check on old Barty and let Dumbledore discover the Imperious curse on old Barty. In this way, everything we do is reasonable. Irina nodded vigorously and said, that's no problem. Next you can start preparing for the second project. By the way, have you opened the golden egg? Hearing Irina's words, Lin reached into the handbag with his left hand and took out the golden egg. You and I know what's in the golden egg and the content of the competition. I just want to feel at ease, Lin En said with a smile. Irina waved her wand and cast a silent floating spell on the golden egg, lifting it up slowly and floating between the two of them. Clear water like a spring. Irina shouted softly, and a thin stream of water gushed out from the top of her wand. Under her control, it turned into a ball of water that could just wrap the golden egg, wrapping it and floating in the air with it. She stepped forward and broke the golden egg. Soon, a series of pleasant and melodious songs came out from the water. Look for us, where our voices ring. We cannot sing on the ground. When you search, please think carefully. We have taken away your most beloved treasure. You only have 1 hour to find and take back the object we took away. After 1 hour, there will be no hope. It has completely disappeared and will never appear again. When the first singing ended and the golden egg was about to start playing the song again, Lin En raised his hand to close the golden egg again. He spread his hands and said, look, the content of the game has not changed. Just go ahead as usual. Irina nodded slightly, then with a smile in her eyes, she looked at Lin En with a smile and said, if I'm not mistaken, the treasure you love most should be me. How about it? Have you figured out how to save me? Lin En also smiled and looked at the girl in front of him and said softly, it's very simple. The first time I see you, I will use the 10,000 curses to remove a coma curse on you. Then, I think your ice armor should be worn by more than one person, right? In fact, to remove a coma spell, only a general anti-spell is needed, and there is no need for advanced anti-spells such as the end of all spells spell. However, thinking that the coma spell on Irina was probably set by Dumbledore, he decided to be safer. After removing the coma spell, Irina under the water was like returning to her own home. Not to mention saving herself, even saving Lin En was more than enough. After all, she has a strong affinity for ice element, and ice is another form of water. The ice phantom that Irina learned can not only transform the magic power in her body into ice power, but also temporarily transform the ice she touches into an energy state similar to ice power for fighting, and the same is true for water. Therefore, Irina in the water is invincible. Her energy in the water is like Lin En who has the Philosopher's Stone, which is almost endless. Of course, as long as you can withstand the cold of the ice armor. Irina smiled and got into Lin En's arms. A cold snowflake condensed from her fingertips and stuck to Lin En's neck. Feeling the naughty behavior of the girl in his arms, Lin En smiled slightly. Although most flames cannot be released in water, Goblet Fairy Fire is not within this range. With Goblet Fairy Fire protecting his body, he naturally would not be afraid of the severe cold. Chapter 342 Alchemical Diving Suit and Magic Pattern Booster. After leaving the room of requirement, Irina went to Hagrid's hut. When she arrived at Hagrid's hut, the sealed doors and windows seemed to have been opened. Through the open door, Irina could see Harry, Ron and Hermione talking to Hagrid. Not far from the three of them, Dumbledore, who had a long beard and a smile on his face, was sitting. Professor Dumbledore, Hagrid. Irina walked into the house and greeted Dumbledore and Hagrid with a smile. Dumbledore and Hagrid both responded to her with a smile, and Hagrid even stuffed a stack of Rockskin biscuits into her hands. It seems that under the persuasion of Dumbledore and the three little ones, Hagrid no longer had the negative emotions caused by the exposure of his half-giant identity. Irina turned her gaze to Hagrid and said, "Hagrid, I think you can come back and teach us now. No one will say bad things about you anymore." Hermione on the side also responded, "Yeah, those parents of students who said in the newspapers that they opposed you are probably those bad guys in Slytherin, or that mother at Skeeter. That woman made it up. You don't have to care about it at all." Hearing what the two said, Hagrid was very moved. His eyes were red. While sobbing, he thanked them. Thank you for being my friend, and for letting me be your professor. It's just that, if that damn female reporter continues to slander us in the Daily Prophet, I'm afraid the reputation of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry will be affected." Before Hagrid could finish speaking, Irina interrupted him and said, "Don't worry, Hagrid. Rita Skeeter won't write bad things about you anymore, or she can't write bad things about you anymore." Long before Lin contacted the editor-in-chief of the Daily Prophet named Michelle to put Rita on ice for 6 months, he informed Irina of the result. Irina fully supported the 6 months, which was neither too long nor too short. She knew that they had no use for Rita Skeeter in this school year, but the momentum that Rita Skeeter could create for them in the next school year, which was 6 months later, might be of great help to them. "She can't write bad things about Hagrid anymore?" "Irina, do you mean she was fired?" Harry seemed to have guessed something. He looked surprised and said with some disbelief. Irina nodded, shook her head, and said, "No, she was hidden for 6 months, which means that at least before the end of the school year, she can't even think of publishing a word in the Daily Prophet." Hearing Irina's words, even the dumbest idiot could guess that Rita Skeeter's being hidden must be related to Irina. Hagrid's eyes became redder, and he repeated again and again, "Thank you, Irina." Dumbledore, who had been listening, nodded to Irina approvingly and said, "You did a good job. The duty of a reporter is to report the truth, not to deliberately and subjectively slander others. Perhaps what happened to Rita Skeeter this time can teach her a good lesson." Dumbledore could naturally see that it was not just Irina who was responsible for this matter, but also Lin's handiwork. However, he was happy to see that Rita was hidden for half a year. After all, no matter who it was, they would not be kind to others when others insulted them as rigid old lunatics without giving them face. Of course, it is absolutely incorrect to say that Dumbledore had ill will towards Rita Skeeter. It can only be said that he did not like this woman who was full of nonsense. On the other hand, Lin did not leave the room of requirement with Irina, but stayed in the room when Irina went to find Hagrid and changed the form of the room of requirement into an alchemy laboratory. The second task of the True Wizard tournament is to dive underwater to rescue the person you love most, and Lin En is best at fire magic, alchemy and transfiguration. There is no doubt that fire magic and transfiguration are of no help to diving. Therefore, if Lin En wants to still make a splash in the second task, then alchemy is the best choice. Lin En's plan for the second task is to use alchemy to make an all-chemical equipment that can help him dive. As for the form of this all-chemical equipment, Lin En has already thought about it. That is, it is an ordinary diving suit. In addition to the oxygen supply and water isolation capabilities that a diving suit should have, Lin En plans to make an all-chemical propeller on the back of this all-chemical equipment, so that he can dive into the water at a faster speed and find Irina. Thinking of this, Lin En took out a lot of metal materials and some magical materials taken from magical animals without hesitation. For the refining of the all-chemical array on the propeller, Lin En can think of hundreds of ways. What Lin En was more entangled with was how to maximize the power of the booster and give people a bright feeling. After thinking fruitlessly, Lin En decided to put the booster aside and turn to making the diving suit. The refining of the all-chemical diving suit can be said to be a bit of a piece of cake for Lin En now. In just one afternoon, a finished all-chemical diving suit appeared in front of Lin En. Unlike the heavy diving suit imagined, this all-chemical diving suit is like a black night suit, as thin as silk. Those metal materials have become as light as silk under the refining of the magic alchemy. Lift it up and pull it hard to both sides, and it can even let light through. Lin En put on the all-chemical diving suit. The black silk diving suit wrapped his whole body, leaving only his eyes exposed with a thin layer of crystal lenses blocking them. This all-chemical diving suit does not need an oxygen tank to supply oxygen. The hundreds of all-chemical arrays engraved on it have already covered this need. These all-chemical arrays can operate autonomously in the water, decomposing a large amount of oxygen from the water and providing it to Lin En inside. After the main body of the all-chemical diving suit is completed, Lin En needs to consider its booster. According to Lin En's idea, the speed of the all-chemical diving suit equipped with a booster in the water must be at least equivalent to the flying speed of the Nimbus 2000 in the air, so that his alchemy can amaze the spectators. Magic pattern booster. Maybe it's a good idea. It seems that I have to buy a firebolt first and copy the all-chemical runes in it, Lin En thought, and wrote down his needs on a piece of parchment. Chapter 343 Mermaid Village. Even Nicholas Flamel could not guarantee that he knew all the all-chemical runes in the world, let alone Lin En! The all-chemical runes used inside the firebolt have always been the secret recipe of the Flying Broom Company, where the firebolt is located, and they must not be disclosed to the outside world. However, Lin En, who has mastered the secret method that can make the all-chemical array inside the all-chemical creation manifest, can steal the all-chemical runes through this cheating method. In this case, Lin En can easily get the all-chemical runes covered by the magic pattern booster engraved inside the firebolt. Of course, Lin En would not be so tasteless as to publicize other people's business secrets everywhere. He only planned to refine this magic pattern booster on the diving suit and would not use it for commercial purposes. Time soon came to the day when the second project of the Triwizard Tournament began. During this time, Lin spent a large sum of gold galleons to buy a firebolt. However, he did not ride it outside the castle. Instead, he dismantled the firebolt under the eyes of his rumored Malfoy. From the tail of the dismantled firebolt, Lin successfully extracted all the all-chemical runes and all-chemical arrays contained in the magic pattern booster installed on the firebolt through secret methods, and on this basis, he improved it through the enhanced all-chemical array and successfully refined the magic pattern thruster on the back of the all-chemical diving suit. When Lin, Harry, Fleur and Crumb arrived at the competition site, the little wizards in the stands were surprised to find that Lin was wearing a black night suit. This night suit covered all parts of Lin except his eyes, and even his eyes were protected by a layer of crystal lenses. And on the back of this black night suit, there was a golden pentagram pattern. Senior Row, what are you wearing? Harry looked at Lin with some surprise. He, Fleur and Crumb were all wearing swimsuits that were easy to use for diving. They had very little fabric on them, so that after they went into the water, the soaked clothes would not be too heavy for them. Fleur also looked over curiously. As an array alchemist, she could naturally see the traces of the all-chemical array on this all-chemical diving suit, especially the magic pattern thrusters on the back. In her eyes, it was almost obvious that this was an all-chemical equipment. Lin shrugged his shoulders and said to the two with a smile, "It's just a little all-chemical equipment, nothing surprising." At this time, Ludo Bagman had come to the referee's stand. He pointed his wand at his throat, just like in the Quidditch World Cup, and whispered, "Loud voice." As Ludo's voice fell, his voice suddenly became as loud as thunder, passing over the dark lake and reaching the stands. "Listen up everyone, our warriors are in position. When I blow the whistle, the second task will begin. They have a full hour to take back what was taken from them. I'll count to 3. 1, 2, 3. Ludo shouted loudly, and the sharp whistle echoed in the cold and still air. Then, cheers and applause broke out from the stands. As the whistle sounded, Crumb jumped into the black lake, and as he jumped into the air, his upper body changed rapidly, and finally turned into a shark's head. In this way, Crumb, half man and half shark, dived into the water, almost stirring up any splashes. Almost immediately after Crumb, Fleur also jumped into the water. She waved her wand to cast a bubblehead charm on herself, and then quickly swam towards the depths of the black lake with her arms. Looking at Crumb and Fleur jumping into the black lake one after another, Lin walked slowly towards the black lake, almost at the same speed as Harry, who was walking on water. However, after the part below Lin's neck was submerged in the water, Lin's mouth slightly raised. The next moment, a strong air wave sprayed out from the golden pentagram pattern behind Lin, and the powerful power carried Lin's body and disappeared from the sight of all the little wizards in the stands in an instant. Driven by this powerful magic pattern booster, Lin's swimming speed in the water was almost comparable to the flying speed of the firebolt in the sky. The scenery in the lake passed by Lin's eyes quickly, and even a series of after images appeared. It was still February in the Black Lake. The lake water, which should have been freezing cold, was no different from the warm water in the bathroom in Lin's perception. Under the rapid operation of the alchemical array inside the alchemical diving suit, the effects of warmth, nourishment, and survival were applied to Lin. Being in the freezing lake water, Lin felt as if he was bathing in the spring breeze and lying comfortably on the lawn in the sun, feeling very comfortable. If the alchemical diving suit on Lin En was sold outside, I'm afraid that 20,000 to 30,000 gold galleons would be an extremely conservative figure. Of course, Lin En had no intention of selling this alchemical diving suit. After diving to a certain depth, Lin En controlled his body to float in the lake water and stop diving deeper. He gently touched a bulge on his waist with his left hand, and at the same time, the magic wand in his right hand pointed at the thing that appeared in his left hand. A two-sided mirror appeared in Lin En's left hand. With the injection of magic power, the two-sided mirror immediately showed Irina a specific location at the moment. Under Lin En's improvement, the two-sided mirrors in his and Irina's hands already had the function of locating each other's specific location. In this way, if one of Lin En or Irina encountered danger, the other could rush to support them at any time through the specific location displayed on the two-sided mirror. Lin En had this new function of the two-way mirror, so that in the last task, after he and Harry were teleported to Little Hangleton Village by the Goblet of Fire, Irina, who had dealt with Barty Crouch Jr., could apparat with Dumbledore through the specific location on the two-way mirror. Unexpectedly, in the second task of the Triwizard Tournament, the new function of the two-way mirror had come in handy. Lin En once again controlled the magic pattern booster behind him and swam rapidly in the direction of the location on the two-way mirror. Soon, he saw a large rock appear in the turbid lake water in front of him. There were many mermaids painted on this large rock. They were holding spears in their hands and were chasing something that looked like a giant squid. Seeing this large rock that was obviously created by mermaids, Lin En smiled slightly. It seemed that he had arrived. Chapter 344 The Awakened Little Witch forces back the mermaid's brilliant golden flame. Lin En did not hesitate. He passed the big rock and swam towards the illusory mermaid singing not far away. Under the acceleration of the magic pattern booster, in just a few breaths, many rough stone dwellings appeared in Lin En's field of vision, with spots of algae on them. Through the windows of these stone dwellings, Lin En could see the faces of the mermaids inside, but these mermaids were not as beautiful as in the legends. On the contrary, they were extremely ugly. The skin of these mermaids was iron grey, their dark green hair was long and unkempt, their eyes were yellow, their incomplete teeth were also yellow, and they wore pebbles strung together with thick ropes around their necks. But when Lin En swam past these mermaids, they smiled at him with ill intentions. In order to see Lin En coming up from the ground more clearly, one or two mermaids even ran out of their stone dwellings, holding spears in their hands, and slapping the lake water with their thick and powerful silver fishtails. Lin En glanced at these mermaids coldly. If these mermaids had not reached an agreement with Dumbledore, they would not attack the young wizard. Moreover, they were not dark creatures. Otherwise, based on their disgusting eyes, Lin En would have burned them with Gobbler's fairy fire. Lin En swam forward quickly. In a few breaths, thousands of stone dwellings passed by Lin En from both sides. Soon, as Lin En turned right at a stone wall, a new scene appeared in Lin En's vision. This seemed to be the square of the mermaid village. There were some stone dwellings around the square, and in front of these stone dwellings, a large group of mermaids were suspended. Among these mermaids, some mermaids were singing in unison. The mermaid singing that attracted Lin En and led the warriors to the Triwizard Tournament came from these mermaids. Behind these mermaids was a rough statue standing at the bottom of the lake. The statue was a big mermaid carved out of a huge stone. On the tail of this big mermaid stone statue were 4 little witches tied tightly. The 4 little witches were Irina, Hermione, Gabrielle Delica, and a little witch wearing the emblem of Ravenclaw College that Lin did not know. However, if Lin remembered correctly, the little witch from Ravenclaw College seemed to be Crumb's dance partner at the Christmas ball that night. A wave of air burst out from the golden pentagram pattern behind Lin, and a huge thrust brought Lin to the 4 little witches. All curses are over. Lin glanced at the mermaids who were staring at him. He chuckled and suddenly waved the wand in his hand. with an invisible wave of light spreading in all directions. The 4 little witches who had fainted woke up one after another. Irina opened her eyes, and the ice blue eyes that stayed on Lin's face were full of joy. Hermione shook her head. She looked at the environment she was in a daze, her face full of doubts, but soon, she seemed to remember something, and looked at Lin with surprise. She didn't expect that Lin could actually remove a coma spell set by Dumbledore and make them all sober. You know, according to Dumbledore's original judgment of the spell, they need to wake up automatically after being rescued from the water, not wake up underwater. And now the reason why they can wake up in advance must be that Lin did something. Gabrielle Delacour and the little witch from Ravenclaw College were all horrified when they saw the environment they were in. After the organizers of the Triwizard Tournament found them and hoped that they could join the second project as Warrior's Treasure, they did not tell them that they needed to enter the dark bottom of the lake. They probably thought that these little witches would not wake up at the bottom of the lake, so there was no need to tell them this. But they never expected that Lin En, who held the curse of ending all curses, would wake them all up at the bottom of the lake. Therefore, the 2 little witches, who had never been to such a gloomy and terrifying place surrounded by a group of ugly mermaids holding weapons, collapsed immediately. They thought they were captured by some black wizard. Seeing the 2 little witches in a state of collapse, Irina quickly paddled her arms and swam to Gabrielle and the little witch from Ravenclaw, telling them the current situation. Don't be afraid, we are now at the bottom of the Black Lake. This is the second part of the Triwizard Tournament. Your warriors will come to rescue you later. At this time, Lin also swam over. He held Irina's hand, looked at Hermione, Gabrielle and the little witch, and asked, do you want to go back with us? If you want to wait for your warriors here, you may have to wait for nearly half an hour. With the acceleration of the magic pattern booster, Lin, who originally needed half an hour to arrive here, now only took less than 5 minutes. According to the time limit of 1 hour for the second event, and Crumb in the original book exceeded the time limit. If you want to wait for the other warriors to arrive here, you need to wait at least half of the time. That is, half an hour. After hearing that they might have to stay in this dark and gloomy place for another half an hour, the 3 little witches shook their heads frantically and swam to Irina's side, hoping to leave with Lin En. You can only take 1 person. At this time, a mermaid who saw this scene swam towards them, waving the trident in his hand and shouting at Lin En. Lin En ignored the obstruction of these mermaids. When he waved his wand, a water grass under his feet turned into a golden rope under the effect of transfiguration. He motioned the 3 little witches to grab the rope. Seeing that Lin En ignored them, these mermaids were all angry. Dozens of mermaids waved their tridents and attacked Lin En. Senior Luoa, be careful, Hermione exclaimed. She wanted to help Lin En resist those mermaids, but before the start of the second event, their wands had been collected. Glancing at the mermaids around, Lin En chuckled. He raised his left hand and made a fist above his head. The next moment, golden flames ignited at the bottom of the Black Lake. The fiercely burning flames instantly drove back the mermaids who were rushing towards him. The mermaids looked at the golden flames in fear and did not dare to move forward for a while. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 345. The other warriors are going to be in vain. Is this goblet of fire? I've seen it in a book, Hermione exclaimed when she saw the golden flame. Not to mention that she had seen this golden flame called goblet fire in a book borrowed from the library. The fact that this golden flame could burn in water was enough to confirm the type of this flame. After all, apart from the fiend fire, the only flame that could burn in water was probably the goblet fire, and the characteristics of the fiend fire were so obvious, so this golden flame could not be the fiend fire. Hermione looked at Lin in disbelief, her eyes full of shock. How is it possible? I read in the book that the goblet fairy fire cannot be controlled by wizards. Lin, why can you control it? This does not match what I read in the book. Before Lin could answer, Irina pulled Hermione's sleeve and whispered in her ear, don't say it, Hermione, Lin is taking us away. Lin's talent in fire magic is obvious to all of us, and it is not surprising that he can do it to any extent. Hearing this, Hermione hesitated and glanced at Lin, who was using the gubbly fairy fire to force the mermaids back. She nodded gently and stopped asking questions. At the same time, after Lin used the gubbly fairy fire to force the mermaids back, he mobilized his magic power and injected it into the magic pattern booster behind him, and the golden pentagram pattern gradually began to shine. Irina put on the ice armor for them. Their bodies are very fragile, and they may not be able to withstand the impact of high-speed underwater movement. Lin En said to Irina. When he raised his hand, 4 all-chemical bracelets with warming function flew out and landed on Irina, Hermione, Gabrielle and the little Ravenclaw witch. Without protective measures, high-speed underwater movement is very harmful to the body. Lin En has the protection of the all-chemical diving suit, and Irina herself will not be affected by the ice power, but the 3 little witches are different. Irina nodded, and her right hand flicked 3 times in a row. 3 ice blow lights flew out from her fingertips and landed on Hermione, Gabrielle and the little Ravenclaw witch, turning into a spreading ice armor that wrapped the 3 people's bodies. Although the ice armor was also cold, they did not feel any discomfort under the warmth of the all-chemical bracelets that Lin En lent them. Seeing that everyone was ready, Lin En nodded slightly. He held Irina's hand with his right hand and grabbed the golden rope that was pulling the 3 little witches with his left hand. He shouted, "Let's go." As Lin En's voice fell, a strong air wave burst out from behind him, pushing Lin En to swim towards the surface of the Black Lake at a faster speed than when he came. The mermaids around wanted to catch up and stop Lin En, but the golden flames that enveloped Lin En at that moment made them very afraid. In the end, they just stamped their feet in hatred and turned away. The nearby scenery quickly swept back, and in just 3 minutes, the group was almost at the surface of the Black Lake. Wait, that seems to be Harry. Just as Lin En was about to return to the starting point in one go, Hermione suddenly said loudly. Hearing this, Lin En slowed down the speed of the magic pattern booster and looked in the direction Hermione pointed. He saw a boy with gills on his face swimming hard towards the depths of the Black Lake. The boy was Harry, who had taken the scissor grass. He did not notice that Lin En and the others flashed by like a streak of light not far from him. He was swimming hard towards the mermaid village, but he did not know that the person he wanted to save had been taken away by Lin En. Harry. Lin En led the others to swim over and called Harry. Harry turned around in surprise. He saw Lin and the 4 little witches behind him. He asked in disbelief, "Senior O, why are you here?" And Irina and Hermione. Lin spread his hands and said, "They are the hostages we are going to rescue in this competition. I think it will take you another half an hour to reach the destination, so just rescue them all." Harry looked at him with difficulty and said, "So, you rescued my hostages too?" Lin chuckled and said, "Of course, if you want, I can return Miss Granger to you, and then you can start your return journey." At this time, Hermione had already loosened the golden rope in her hand. Although she could return to the lake faster by following Lin, Harry's performance would be ruined if he didn't rescue anyone. For the sake of his own eldest son, what does it matter if he returns later? Looking at Hermione, who was swimming towards him, Harry said gratefully, "Thank you, Senior O, thank you, Hermione. Then we will go back." After that, Harry took Hermione's hand and went back in the direction they came from. After putting Hermione down, Lin once again controlled the magic booster and flew towards the lake. This time they were much smoother and did not meet other warriors. Including the time for acceleration, Lin only spent another 2 minutes, and he took Irina, Gabrielle and the little witch from Ravenclaw directly out of the water under the powerful thrust, and then fell from the air. Wingardium Leviosa. Lin waved his wand, and 4 floating spells were cast in an instant, causing everyone to fall to the ground at an extremely slow speed. Seeing Lin jumping out of the Black Lake with 3 little witches, Ludo Bagman, who was the commentator, exclaimed, "What? It's only been 10 minutes since the start of the game, and our champion Roll has already rescued his hostages and returned to the ground. Wait. Merlin's briefs. Champion Roll not only rescued his treasures, but also rescued the hostages of Champion Delica and Champion Crumb. Oh, I can't imagine what Champion Delica and Champion Crumb would think after arriving at their destination and finding that there was no one there," Ludo said loudly, and sent someone to pick up Lin. About 10 minutes after Lin, Irina, Gabrielle and the little Ravenclaw witch walked onto the stands. Harry also came out of the Black Lake with Hermione. After Harry, nearly 20 minutes later, Fleur came out. However, Fleur did not come back after arriving at her destination, but was rescued after being attacked by a group of Grindylows and had to ask for help. Chapter 346 Don't Kiss My Boyfriend. In fact, Fleur's talent is not bad, but she has used most of her talent in her alchemy field, which has led to her not being so outstanding in magic. Perhaps with her strength, it is no problem to deal with 1 or 2 Grindylows, but if she encounters a group of Grindylows, then she can only admit that she is unlucky. At this time, someone will ask, isn't it said that Fleur is very good in the field of alchemy, then why can't she defeat the group of Grindylows through alchemy? In fact, before alchemists can make a raise out of thin air, alchemists in the magic world are equivalent to the identity of craftsmen with special abilities. In addition to wearing alchemy equipment with various effects in advance, they cannot apply alchemy to actual combat. And these means, those pureblood families with a lot of gold galleons can also do it by purchasing alchemy equipment. Therefore, when facing a real battle, there is no difference between alchemists and ordinary wizards, and they are even much weaker than ordinary wizards. Even in the French magic world, which is rich in alchemists, there are probably less than 10 alchemists who can create a raise out of thin air like Wallace and Green and Lin. Fleur, come back. What are you going to do? At this time, Madame Maxim ran to the shore of the Black Lake. She pulled Fleur hard and shouted. However, Fleur, who had just been rescued, was hysterical and desperately jumped into the water. She shouted loudly, "No, Madame Maxim. My sister is still in there. She is still so young. I must save her." Fleur was so anxious that her eyes were red. She tried hard to break free from Madame Maxim's hand holding her sister. But at this moment, a soft and weak voice came from behind her, making her stay where she was. After a while, Fleur turned her head suddenly and saw Gabrielle Delica being led by Lin and Irina. "Gabrielle. Are you okay, Gabrielle? Are you not hurt?" Fleur quickly hugged Gabrielle in her arms. She checked Gabrielle's body, fearing that her sister would be hurt even a little bit in this damn game. Gabrielle gently hugged her sister and whispered, "I'm fine, sister. The brother rescued us half an hour ago. I was just worried about you." Hearing Gabrielle's words, Fleur raised her head with red eyes and looked at Lin. "Oh, thank you, Lin. If it weren't for you, I don't know what I would do." Fleur jumped out at lightning speed. Before Irina could react, she hugged Lin and said with sobs. After saying this, Fleur even leaned over and wanted to kiss Lin on the side of her face. However, Irina had already reacted at this time. When she saw Fleur wanting to kiss Lin En, her pupils suddenly trembled. When she raised her hand, an ice blue light broke through the air, forming an ice wall between Lin En and Fleur, separating the two. Irina rushed out quickly and pulled Lin En behind her. She stared at Fleur closely, fearing that she would do something improper to her boyfriend. Irina looked at Fleur in a serious manner and said word by word, "Don't kiss my boyfriend." Seeing this scene, Fleur immediately reacted. Her face was slightly red, and she said awkwardly, "I'm sorry, Miss Lowell, I was too excited just now. I lost my composure. I apologize to you." Fleur's kiss just now was completely involuntary, and the French atmosphere was very open, so Fleur didn't think there was anything wrong with her doing so. It was not until Irina stopped her that she realized that Lin was now taken, and Lin and Irina did not seem to be the kind of people who were particularly open. Seeing Fleur apologize, Irina's vigilance eased a lot. She stretched out her hand and said, "It's okay, Miss Delica. It's just that I don't like other girls to be too intimate with Lin, and my behavior just now was a bit too radical." Fleur was stunned. She smiled and held Irina's hand and shook it gently. After the group returned to the stands, more than 20 minutes passed. About 5 or 6 minutes after exceeding the 1-hour time limit of the second event, Crumb emerged from the Black Lake. He walked towards the stands with a gloomy face. It was obvious that he had gained nothing in the Black Lake. In fact, all the hostages had been rescued when Harry and Hermione returned from the lake, and the game should have ended, but after discussion, the referees unanimously decided to end the game after all the warriors returned. After all, the time it takes for a warrior to return is also an important criterion for judging the score. After all the warriors came back, Ludo also walked down from the referee's stand and announced everyone's scores. Ladies and gentlemen, we have finally made a decision. We have decided to give each warrior the following scores, based on a full score of 50. Although Fleur-Delica showed excellent use of the bubblehead charm, she was attacked by Grindylow when approaching her destination, and failed to successfully rescue the hostages. We give her 25 points. As Ludo's words fell, applause encouraging Fleur still came from the stands. Hearing the applause from the surroundings, Furing shook her head gently and whispered, "I should have scored 0 points." At this time, Ludo continued to announce, Victor Crumb used transfiguration, which was incomplete but still effective. Although he failed to rescue his hostages, it was not his fault. We reserved most of the points for rescuing the hostages for him. We give him 35 points. Compared with Crumb, who got 40 points in the original book, Crumb was deducted 5 points now, but considering that he not only exceeded the time limit, but also failed to rescue the hostages, this score is not surprising. Harry Potter took the chinweed and achieved amazing results. He returned second, and it took less than 1/3 of the time limit of the game, and rescued the hostages. We give him 45 points. Ludo said so. Harry's score in this game was the same as in the original. Although he returned faster this time and rescued the hostages, he did not show his noble character and rescue other hostages like in the original. Therefore, 45 points was already very high for Harry. After Harry, it was Lin's score. Ludo announced it again. Lin completed a round trip in just 10 minutes and even rescued 3 warriors, including himself. Although rescuing other warriors' hostages did not meet our regulations, considering that the mermaids would prevent the warriors from taking away other hostages, and Lin succeeded in doing so despite the mermaids' obstruction, we unanimously decided to count the other 2 hostages he rescued into his score. We decided to give him 49 points. As Lin's score was announced, unprecedented applause broke out in the stands. Everyone was happy that Lin's score was infinitely close to full marks. Chapter 347. Why not ask the amazing Dumbledore? In fact, with Lin's performance in this event, he could have gotten full marks, and who deducted the remaining 1 point? From Karkaroff's unhappy face behind the referee's table, perhaps we can get a glimpse of it. Karkaroff wanted to give Lin a low score, but he remembered the warning given by Ludo Bagman and Barty Crouch Sr. in the first event. If he maliciously gave a low score to the Warriors again, his qualification as a referee would be revoked. So, no matter how reluctant he was, he had to give Lin a 9, and the 1 point deducted was probably because he was expressing his dissatisfaction and impotent rage. After all, compared with the loss of his own warriors, which made Durmstrang School of Magic relatively backward in the Triwizard Tournament, the cancellation of his qualification as a referee as the principal was probably more embarrassing for Durmstrang School of Magic. After learning about Lin's score, Harry and Fleur also applauded him. There was no way. Lin's performance in this event was indeed indisputable. Only Crumb seemed unhappy. Lin had rescued his hostage half an hour before he arrived at his destination. He felt like he was being fooled and had made a wasted trip. At this time, after announcing the scores of all the warriors, Ludo Bagman said loudly, "The third and final project will be held on the evening of June 24th. The warriors will know the specific content of the project 1 month in advance. Thank you for your support to the warriors." In this way, the second project of the Triwizard Tournament was over, and Lin was still leading the first place with a score of only 1 point away from the full score. After walking down the stands, Irina looked at Lin nervously and whispered, "How is it? Has old Barty shown up?" Lin shook his head with a heavy face and said, "No, according to the information from the Ministry of Magic, old Barty is still claiming to be sick and unable to go out, and this time Percy Wheeleye will be the referee in place of old Barty as his assistant." Hearing this, Irina frowned. If they can't even see old Barty, how can they save him? Exclamation mark. Lin En didn't say anything, but took Irina to the Forbidden Forest, where few people go. After making sure that there was no one around, he thought and said, "If I remember correctly, the escaped Peter Pettigrew should have contacted Voldemort in this timeline. I will use the soul charm to explore the vision I inserted into him. Maybe there will be unexpected gains." As Lin En said, he waved his wand lightly, and a screen transformed by magic appeared in front of the two. With Lin En's thoughts, Peter Pettigrew's vision appeared in the lower left corner of Lin En's vision like a split screen. Lin En waved his wand again and projected the vision of Peter Pettigrew in the lower left corner of his vision onto the magic screen. Peter Pettigrew seems to be in a house. Judging from the environment outside the window, he should still be in the UK. Irina looked at Peter Pettigrew's vision projected on the screen and analyzed it. On this magic screen, Peter Pettigrew's first-person perspective was being shown. In the picture was a dark room, and the outside environment could be seen through the window. Just when the two had no more gains, Peter Pettigrew seemed to stand up and walk towards another closed room. After Peter Pettigrew opened the door of that room, Lin and Irina both screamed subconsciously. They saw that the old Barty Crouch they had been looking for was lying on the floor of this room. He looked pale and seemed to be about to die at any time. On both sides of old Barty stood two Death Eaters with dark marks on their arms. Lin and Irina did not know the Death Eater standing on the left, but they knew the identity of the Death Eater standing on the right very well. Antonin Dolohov. You can see that this Death Eater is so pale that he is almost on the ground. He has dark hair and brown eyes, but he has been in Azkaban for many years and is obviously tortured. His eyes are full of madness, and his face is a little distorted. If Lin and Irina remember correctly, Antonin Dolohov was Voldemort's first batch of Death Eaters, and one of Voldemort's most loyal Death Eaters. As early as the First Wizarding War, Antonin Dolohov killed Mrs. Weasley's two brothers, the Prewett brothers. I didn't expect that Voldemort would care so much about old Barty that he would arrange one of his most respected Death Eaters to guard old Barty, Irina said. Hearing this, Lin En chuckled and said, "This is not surprising. If Voldemort intends to control the entire Ministry of Magic after his resurrection, then controlling the Ministry's top leaders is his primary task. As the director of the Ministry's International Magic Exchange and Cooperation Department, old Barty is naturally one of the Ministry's top leaders." Irina nodded slightly and said, "What we need to do now is to analyze where exactly this house is in the UK, and whether there are other Death Eaters in this house besides Peter Pettigrew, Dolohov and the unknown Death Eater." According to the original plotline, after Voldemort was found by Peter Pettigrew, he was taken to old Barty's house by Peter Pettigrew, and together with little Barty, he controlled old Barty with the Imperious Curse, and lived in old Barty's house. But obviously, during this Christmas holiday, after little Barty broke into Azkaban prison, and released all the Death Eaters, this information was already broken. Just like Sirius Black, who was still a fugitive in the original book, could hide in his ancestral home where he had cast the Fidelius charm when he was wanted by the Ministry of Magic, the Death Eaters could do the same. Whether it was the Lestrange family or other pureblood families with Death Eaters, they could provide a large number of bases for Voldemort. Therefore, Voldemort could no longer hide in Little Hangleton Village or Old Barty's house as in the original book. Lin said, "Why not ask the magical Dumbledore? With his wide experience, he might be able to recognize which part of the UK this is." Irina nodded in agreement and said, "Then let's go back to the castle to find Dumbledore." Hearing Irina's suggestion, Lin smiled and shook his head, waved his wand jokingly, and said, "No need, look at me. Dumbledore is flying over." Chapter 348 I don't want anything to happen to any of my students. Irina looked at Lin En in silence and said, "You know very well that, if the wizard is vigilant and resistant to the flying curse, the flying curse on the wizard will not succeed. This is why the flying curse can only be used on objects. There are few precedents of using the flying curse on other wizards in the magic world. Unlike other offensive spells, if the wizard who is judged by the flying curse has even a little reluctance and resistance in his heart, the flying curse on the wizard will fail. This is why in actual combat, few wizards use the flying curse on the enemy. Let the bullets fly for a while." Lin En did not refute Irina's words. He just smiled mysteriously and said softly. At the same time, in the principal's office, Dumbledore pinched a piece of sizzling bee candy from the drawer and put it in his mouth. He squinted his eyes and enjoyed the sweetness in his mouth, but at this moment, Dumbledore felt a pulling force coming from his body. He was stunned for a moment, but seemed to have thought of something. He did not resist the pulling force on himself, but waved his wand to open the window, allowing his body to be pulled through the window more smoothly by the sudden pulling force. Chirp. Fawkes, the phoenix standing on the shelf, looked at Dumbledore flying out of the window. The whole bird was stunned in place, and its big eyes were full of confusion. Dumbledore's body was flying in the air, flying all the way to the direction of the Forbidden Forest. In the Forbidden Forest, looking at Dumbledore flying quickly from the air and landing in front of her, Irina was numb all over. She looked at Lin En strangely. After Dumbledore arrived, Lin En smiled and explained, I have made an agreement with Professor Dumbledore before. If I encounter any trouble in the territory of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry and need Professor Dumbledore's help, I can directly cast the flying spell to summon Professor Dumbledore to me. Of course, there is no need to worry about this method being learned by others. After all, no one thinks that they can really summon Professor Dumbledore. Seeing the bizarre agreement between the old and the young, Irina shook her head and sighed. Professor Dumbledore, please help me take a look at this place. Maybe you can recognize which corner of the UK this is. Irina pointed to the magic screen between her and Lin En and said to Dumbledore. Dumbledore followed Irina's hand and looked at the magic screen. After seeing the picture on the screen, Dumbledore was obviously surprised and then recalled that Lin En had mentioned that he could get the vision of Barty Crouch Jr. and then he was relieved. Since Lin was able to obtain the vision of Barty Crouch Jr., it must be that they also obtained each other's vision through the soul charm after they discovered Peter Pettigrew's true identity in the last school year. Well, I think it is a very correct choice for you to let me determine the location of this house. I know where it is, or rather, I have been to that house myself. This is old Barty's home. He invited me to his home 5 years ago. I still remember this room. At that time, this room was full of warm and soft lights, which was completely different from the shabby, dim, cluttered with Death Eaters now. Dumbledore said thoughtfully. Hearing this, both Lin and Irina were refreshed. Lin said quickly, Professor Dumbledore, as early as the night when the Goblet of Fire decided the champions of the Triwizard Tournament, I judged that old Barty was likely to be under the imperious curse of young Barty. However, I didn't think it was a good time to rescue old Barty at that time, so I didn't say it. However, now old Barty is obviously about to collapse. For the sake of old Barty's life safety, I think we should go to support old Barty as soon as possible. Therefore, please ask Professor Dumbledore to tell us the location of old Barty's home. We hope to go there tonight to rescue old Barty, Lin said seriously. In the process of observing the house through Peter Pettigrew's vision just now, Lin and Irina can confirm that there are only 4 people in the house, namely old Barty, Peter Pettigrew, Antonin Dolohov and the unknown Death Eater, and there is no other ambush. In just over 10 minutes, Peter Pettigrew vigilantly patrolled the entire house twice, but it was Peter Pettigrew's vigilance that exposed the defensive strength of the house. Dumbledore did not reject Lin's proposal. He whispered, I understand. I will go to old Barty's house tonight to rescue him in the name of visiting an old friend who is seriously ill. Hearing this, Lin shook his head and said, No, Professor Dumbledore, you don't understand what I mean. Hogwarts Castle still needs you to stay in charge. Similarly, we also need you, the headmaster, to come forward to stabilize young Barty who is presenting himself as Professor Moody. Only if you can keep an eye on young Barty the whole time tonight can we ensure that the news will not leak out and young Barty will not be aware of it. Dumbledore hesitated and said, I know this guy Antonin Dolohov. His magic level is far beyond that of the elite auras and is also above that of young Barty Crouch. Some people say that if he had not been arrested and imprisoned in Azkaban for more than 10 years, he would have become a demon level wizard. I'm worried whether you can deal with him. As the first and most loyal group of Death Eaters of Voldemort, Antonin Dolohov's magic level is naturally not bad. Even the veteran elite auras may not be able to survive around under him. This is also the reason why Dumbledore is worried about whether Lin and Irina can defeat him. Don't worry, Professor. Even if we are not as good as Antonin Dolohov in his prime, in front of my forbidden magic fire, even the magic power of the Demon King level wizard will be weakened a lot, let alone him. Lin said so. Facing an enemy, they must pay attention to the opponent tactically and despise the opponent strategically. Otherwise, it will not help the battle to simply boost the enemy's morale and destroy their own prestige. Seeing that Lin and Irina were full of confidence, Dumbledore finally chose to trust them. He shouted, Forks. A flash of fire flashed, and the Phoenix Forks appeared in front of the 3. At Dumbledore's signal, Fawkes took off a tail feather from his own body and placed it in Irina's hand. If you are in danger, inject magic into this phoenix tail feather. Listen to me, Lin, Irina, I don't want any of my students to get into trouble, okay? Your life safety is far more important than those conspiracies and tricks. Dumbledore looked at the two students in front of him with a kind look and said softly, Chapter 349 Peter Pettigrew. In response to Dumbledore's gentle gaze, Lin and Irina were both somewhat moved. Irina nodded gently and said, Don't worry, Professor. A gentleman does not stand under a dangerous wall. Since we are planning to take action, we must be confident. What's more, there may not be only Lin and I who will act together. Hearing this, Dumbledore was slightly stunned and said, Are there other people who want to participate in this operation? Lin replied, Irving is also one of us, Professor. Do you remember what we agreed before? At the end of the school year, Irving also needs to face Voldemort with us. I think he needs some opportunities to exercise himself before that. I'm relieved about you, Dumbledore said worriedly, but Irving doesn't have as strong magic as you. In addition, the battle changes rapidly, and the enemy is a vicious Death Eater like Dolohov. I'm worried that Irving can't protect himself. Lin chuckled and said, Professor, since we plan to bring Irving with us, we will naturally ensure his safety. For this, I also plan to bring an adult wizard. After hearing what Lin En said, not only Dumbledore, but also Irina looked at him in surprise. Irina seemed to have some guesses, and she asked hesitantly, Lin En, you mean, if I'm not mistaken, the person you want to take with you should be Uncle Sirius, right? After hearing the name Sirius from Irina, Dumbledore was even more surprised, and he looked at Lin En with a questioning look. Lin nodded and smiled, that's right. The reason why we wanted to spare Pettigrew's life was because we still needed him to revive Voldemort, right? But now, Barty Crouch Jr. has released all the Death Eaters in Azkaban, which means that Pettigrew has lost his value. After losing all his value, it's time for the traitor Pettigrew to go to hell and confess to Harry's parents. I think Uncle Sirius will be very interested in executing Pettigrew. At the same time, with Uncle Sirius, I can safely entrust Irving to him and let him lead Irving to kill Pettigrew and the Death Eater. As for Antonin Dolohov, I will leave it to Irina and me. Lin arranged it this way. Although Lin and Irina looked down on Antonin Dolohov strategically and believed that they could definitely kill him, tactically, Lin and Irina did not look down on the vicious Death Eater at all. Even when fighting against dozens of Death Eaters including Barty Crouch Jr., Lin only raised his hand to release a ball of forbidden magic fire, and the tasks related to the battle were given to Irina alone. But when facing Antonin Dolohov, Lin and Irina planned to join forces to kill him. It can be seen how much they value this Death Eater. If Sirius is here, then I think I can feel at ease about this operation. After learning about Lin and Irina's arrangements, Dumbledore said with a smile, Sirius Black was also a member of the Order of the Phoenix founded by Dumbledore, and Dumbledore was quite clear about Sirius's magic level. Although Sirius's magic level has regressed after being imprisoned in Azkaban for more than 10 years, after adapting for more than half a year, Sirius's magic level has roughly returned to its peak. Even though he was still far behind Lin and Irina, it was not a big problem to protect a 5th-year wizard who was already quite capable. After telling Lin and Irina the address of Old Barty, Dumbledore returned to the principal's office. Lin and Irina contacted Irving and Sirius respectively. It was easy to find Irving. As a young wizard from Slytherin College, Lin only needed to return to the Slytherin common room, and the first person he saw was Irving, who was talking to Astoria. Irving, come here. Lin waved to Irving. Irving came over with some doubts and asked, Lin, what's the matter? Lin said seriously, there is an operation tonight. Do you want to participate? Let me make it clear first. Although Irina and I will do our best to ensure your safety, you are still at risk of death. After hearing the word death, Irving's body trembled, but his eyes gradually changed from suspicion at the beginning to firmness. He asked softly, can I ask what kind of operation it is? Close your ears and block your ears. Lin waved his wand so that the conversation between the two could not be heard by others. You should have seen the news that the Death Eaters escaped from Azkaban prison, and our enemies tonight are 3 Death Eaters. As he said that, Lin told the target of tonight's operation. After learning that among the 3 Death Eaters, there is a terrifying guy like Antonin Dolohov, Irving's eyes also became more solemn. Don't worry, I won't let you fight against this guy Dolohov. You are no match for him now. He is the prey of Irina and I, Lin En said lightly. Hearing this, Irving was shocked, and he looked at Lin En with a little more admiration. Being able to call a vicious Death Eater like Dolohov prey shows how strong Lin En's self-confidence and his own magic level are. I understand, Lin En, take me with you tonight, Irving said solemnly. Lin En grinned, raised his hand, and put it on Irving's shoulder, saying, of course, my brother. On the other side, Irina took out the little curled winged demon and her own little owl emergency food from the small world inside the suitcase. In order to live with Harry during the summer vacation, Sirius bought a house on Privet Drive, and Sirius has been living in that house during this period. Privet Drive is so far away from Hogwarts Castle. If you just write a letter and ask emergency food to send it to Sirius, who knows if Sirius will receive the letter tomorrow. Therefore, Irina planned to let the little curled winged demon to deliver the letter, but since the little curled winged demon did not have the blood magic of an owl that could automatically find the recipient, Irina could only let emergency food lead the way for the little curled winged demon. Chapter 350 The battle begins. Rub the door keys to rescue the hostages. So, Irina tied a written letter to the leg of the emergency food, and then asked the little curled winged demon to wrap the emergency food around its body and let the emergency food lead the way. Looking at the little curled winged demon flying out at a speed that was difficult to see with the naked eye, Irina clapped her hands, put away her suitcase, and returned to Hogwarts Castle. In fact, the little curled winged demon's flying speed was indeed very fast. Before dusk, the little curled winged demon returned with emergency food and Sirius letter. Irina opened the envelope. In addition to a letter, there was also a two-sided mirror in the envelope. It was found by Sirius in the black ancestral home during the summer vacation. Compared with the two-sided mirror found by Lin En, the two-sided mirror that Sirius gave Irina was much more ordinary. Except for being able to see and hear the person on the other side of the two-sided mirror. After injecting magic power, it had no other functions. Of course, Sirius gave this two-sided mirror to Irina, just to serve as a phone. Irina injected magic into the two-sided mirror according to the method written in the letter by Sirius. Soon, Sirius' face appeared in the two-sided mirror in Irina's hand. Irina, what exactly do you mean by tonight's action? Dumbledore asked Fawkes to tell me that you would take me to do something, and also told me that you let Peter Pettigrew go that day. Why did you do this? After receiving Irina's letter, Sirius was always waiting for the picture presented by the two-sided mirror. Therefore, after Irina appeared in the two-sided mirror, Sirius asked anxiously, "Don't worry, Uncle Sirius," Irina said, and she told Sirius about the action plan for tonight. After saying all this, Irina asked with a smile, "How about it? Isn't it better to kill Peter Pettigrew with your own hands than to let him stay in Azkaban prison?" Hearing Irina's words, Sirius was silent. After a while, he nodded and said, "You are right, Irina. Thank you and Lin for giving me this opportunity to kill the damn traitor Peter Pettigrew." Irina spread her hands and said with a smile, "This is what we should do. We are all family. We are all family." Sirius's expression moved slightly. He seemed to think of something. "And the way you address me, could it be that you and Lin?" Yes, although Irina's pretty face was a little red, she still admitted generously, "Lin and I are together now, just before the Christmas ball." Hearing this, Sirius smiled and nodded, saying, "I knew it." Although the True Wizard tournament has not been held for a long time, according to existing records, the Christmas balls in previous years are similar to blind dates. At each Christmas ball, many young wizards who were still somewhat distant have established relationships because of this. Irina did not talk to Sirius for too long. After she explained the action plan for the evening, and made an appointment to meet Sirius in Hogsmeade Village after the dinner at Hogwarts Castle, she cut off the connection of the two-way mirror. At this point, the 4 people involved in the plan to rescue Old Barty and kill the Death Eaters are all alive. After the dinner, Lin, Irina and Irving passed through the secret passage and arrived at Hogsmeade Village. Not far from the Hogshead Bar, the 3 saw Sirius wearing a black cloak. "Uncle Sirius, this is the address of Old Barty. We haven't learned the apparition yet, so please help me." Lin handed a piece of parchment with the address of old Barty to Sirius and said, "No problem. Just hand over the damn traitor Peter Pettigrew to me later." Sirius grinned, and after the three people put their hands on him, he waved his wand and released the apparition. The next moment, the four people's figures twisted and disappeared from the spot. In the blink of an eye, the four people appeared outside an old house. Looking at the old house in the distance, that was exactly the same as the one in Peter Pettigrew's vision. Lin knew that he was in the right place. Without anyone reminding him, the four people consciously cast a layer of disillusionment on themselves and lurked in the direction of the old house. Allahu open. Arriving at the door of the old house, Irina whispered the spell, and with a click, the door lock opened. Perhaps Dalahov and the others did not think that anyone would know that old Barty was imprisoned by them, and that no one would come to rescue old Barty, so they did not use the counter curse of the unlocking spell on the door of the old house, which made the four people's infiltration very smooth. At this time, Dalahov, Peter Pettigrew and another unknown Death Eater were having dinner in the living room, while the door of the room where old Barty was open, and old Barty was still unconscious on the floor. "Who is it?" After noticing that the door of the old house was opened quietly, Dalahov immediately stood up and pointed his wand in the direction of the door. The battle-hardened Dalahov knew that the door of the old house was opened by no means an accident, but was deliberately done by a wizard who cast an illusion spell. After realizing that they were exposed, Lin En and the others no longer concealed themselves. Lin En immediately removed his illusion spell and then raised his wand to point at Dalahov. Thunder explosion. An orange-red light was emitted, shooting out in the direction of Dalahov. Seeing that the newcomer was going to fight without saying anything, Dalahov knew that the newcomer had bad intentions. He waved his wand without hesitation and released the silent armor spell. While Lin and Dalahov were fighting, Irina quickly took out a worn-out teacup from her pocket. A ball of attributeless magic separated the teacup and Irina's hand holding it. Irina tapped the teacup with her wand, Mentis. She was chanting the spell to make a door key. In the past 6 months of practice, the time she needed to make a door key with a fixed destination has been shortened from more than half an hour to a few seconds. The teacup in Irina's hand suddenly emitted light. Before the door key was triggered, Irina threw it in the direction of old Barty without hesitation. After a few breaths, the teacup fell on old Barty, and a white light bloomed, taking old Barty's body away from the spot. After watching old Barty disappear, Irina breathed a sigh of relief. Old Barty's departure meant that the Death Eaters had lost their only hostage, and it also meant that Irina no longer had to be timid in the next battle. Even if she used the explosion curse to blow up the old house, she didn't have to worry about the collapse of the old house accidentally injuring the unconscious old Barty. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.